Chapter 472. After going through 7 lives, Ning Shu thought that she had seen all kinds of people, but the scene in front of her made her feel as if she was in an ice cave, as if she had seen the most evil. The coachman's hands trembled. He wanted to take Ning Shu and break out, but he was blocked by the invisible wall of people. She coldly met the peddler's evil eyes, as if it was the last tug of war where she was unwilling to admit defeat. "Do you regret it, stupid girl? For this group of people, you offended this old man. Your intestines must be green with regret, ha ha ha." That person grinned, showing his yellow teeth, and laughed loudly. "Although you are so ugly that you can't see people, your body looks slender and tasty. How about this? As long as you take off your clothes in front of these people, take the initiative to serve this old man, and make this old man happy, maybe this old man will let you go out of kindness. Ha ha ha." The old man was so angry that his face turned green. He wanted to rush over and fight with his life. Ning Shu pulled him back. She was like a piece of jade that was at the end of her rope, but was as firm as ever. She would rather die than live in dishonor. "In this life, as long as I make a decision, I will never regret it, and I will never admit defeat. Ha ha, stubborn. Then let's see how long you can hold on." 38, 39, 40. More and more people racked their brains to think of a way to persuade Ning Shu to take the initiative to die. Some people even began to touch the sticks beside them, waiting for the first person to stand out and swing the stick. But someone spat, "Pay. How can you people have the nerve to say such things? You really make people look down on you." Everyone looked towards the voice. Ning Shu also looked up with a pale face, and found that the person who spoke was the young man who Ning Shu just now. He said, "Just now you all ganged up to look down on women, saying that they can't do great things, and that they all rely on men to live. Now you want to force people to sacrifice for us. Are you still men? You want your son to live, but your son saw your despicable and evil deeds with his own eyes today. In the future, if he learns from you, he will most likely grow up to be a bad embryo. If you have the ability, then pick up the wooden stick beside you and resist. Only by killing these bandits can you show your ability." Someone immediately retorted, "What right do you have to say that about us? Don't you want to live? So pompous. Bah, I don't believe it." The young man said, "It's true that I want to live, but if I force others to die for me in order to live for myself, what's the difference between that and me murdering someone with my own hands? Even if such a murderer were to live, he would live like a beast for the rest of his life. A beast is a beast. It's better to be alive than dead." Another person said, "I also don't think I can do this. Although I haven't been to school for many days, my mother has taught me a lot about life. Even if I sell my soul and live on, I won't have the face to see my mother in the future. If my family and friends knew that I had done this, I would never be able to raise my head again. I can't do it, I can't do it." After a short and long period of hesitation, the crowd was divided into 2 distinct factions. At first, they were evenly matched, and no one could convince the other. Slowly, more and more people stood on Ning Shu's side. When the count of 50 finally ended, the merchantess' face darkened with dissatisfaction. After the turn of the mountain, the warm wind gradually melted Ning Shu's frozen limbs and bones. She let out a long sigh of relief and smiled. "It seems that I've won, and you've finally lost once. In this world, there are still many people and few ghosts." The merchant narrowed his eyes in anger. His fierce-looking face trembled. "Oh, you all want to be a human, but not a beast? Then I'll satisfy you. Come, light the fire. Kill them all. Don't leave a single one." Ning Shu said sternly, "Come on, let's see who's afraid when you fake ghosts meet me, a real ghost." As the merchant clapped his hands, dozens of black shadows outside the house broke through the doors and windows like ghosts. They held knives and entered. The blood trough of each knife was stained with blood that couldn't be washed away. With red eyes, they bared their teeth and pounced on the little lambs in the temple, ready to skin and eat the meat. But the moment they stepped into the house, suddenly a spark flashed quickly, followed by a loud explosion. Those bandits didn't have time to escape and were blown up into the sky. This sudden turn of events happened too quickly. The remaining survivors hurriedly retreated, but before they could even take a step, another fiery light blasted the remaining survivors, causing blood to splatter everywhere and limbs to fly in all directions. No one expected that the original desperate situation would be reversed in an instant. The merchant was scared silly. He shouted, "What's going on? What did you do? What did you do?" Ning Shu took back the hand that was covering her ears and patted her little heart. Then she smiled and clapped her hands briskly. Pan Gui and the mute girl who had disappeared silently from just now finally returned. She raised her eyebrows happily. "Brother, thank you for being willing to waste time to play this game with me. Otherwise, my maidservants wouldn't be able to find the opportunity to secretly set up these exquisite little plans when you weren't paying attention. How is it? Are you satisfied with these few gifts?" Chapter 473. More than half of the 20 brothers had died in an instant. The merchant was furious. "You bitch! I want your life." The mute girl turned and blocked in front of Ning Shu with her whip. Her gaze was like a blade, as though she was saying, "You come. If you want to kill my young miss, you have to go through me first." The remaining few bandits who were still breathing immediately raised their swords and surrounded Ning Shu the moment they received the merchant's command. No one cared about the passers-by anymore. They only had one goal: to cut Ning Shu into 1,000 pieces to vent their anger. The passers-by had experienced the shocking scene and were all scared silly. When they woke up, their survival instincts made them swarm out of the temple. But they didn't expect that when they took a few steps out of the ruined temple, pairs of wolf-like eyes flashed from behind the pitch-black walls and surrounded them. Hearing the miserable howls and sky-shaking cries outside, mixed with the cries of children, the red blood was washed by the rain and quickly turned the ruined temple into a blood-red sea. The faint smile on Ning Shu's face instantly froze. Not good. She was one step behind. She hadn't thought that this group of bandits had another move. The merchant licked the hot blood on the iron ore and showed his fangs. He said with a sinister smile, "You think you are a mantis? No, I'm the Oriole. I want everyone here to die." With reinforcements, the killing power of the rampaging evil spirits multiplied. Each one was a bloodthirsty beast. Even though the mute girl was skilled, she was still at a disadvantage when fighting one against many. Ning Shu was protected in the middle by the old carriage driver and Pangui and gradually fell into a disadvantage. After the mute girl was cut once, there was a second cut, a third cut. Blood soaked the light purple cloth on the mute girl's body like the rain outside. Pangui and the old carriage driver were also slowly injured. Ning Shu kicked a bandit over and looked at the deep wounds on their bodies. Her heart felt like it was being stabbed. What to do? If this continued, they would all die here. Seeing that the mute girl's arm had been slashed again, the soft whip fell to the ground with a pa sound. A foot swept over and kicked her against the wall, causing her to spit out a mouthful of blood, and then stepped on her to the ground. When the dealer grinned hideously and raised the iron awl in his hand to pierce through the mute girl's spine, Ning Shu dropped the sword in her hand with a clang. She gritted her teeth and said, "Don't kill her. I'm the one who offended you. Let her go and I'll give you my life." "Your life for me? All right, cut yourself first to show me your sincerity before you speak. Otherwise, I'll immediately chop off her head and chop her flesh into pieces for you to see." There was blood at the corner of the mute girl's mouth. She turned her head with difficulty and looked at Ning Shu in shock. She shook her head desperately and said, "No, miss, you have to escape. There was still time. Don't worry about me. You mustn't hurt yourself." Pan Gui's face was ashen white. "Miss." Yet Ning Shu did not hesitate at all. She grabbed the knife that had just been thrown away, closing her eyes and hardening her heart. "All right, if you're a man, you'll keep your word." Her hand raised and the knife fell. A white knife light splashed with hot blood. Ning Shu covered her arm and knelt on one knee on the ground, her body convulsing in pain. Pain, 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 pain. It turned out that chopping oneself would cause such pain. Her vision blurred and she almost fainted. She bit the tip of her tongue and pulled back a thread of reason. Chapter 474. Large beads of cold sweat fell to the ground. She reached out her arm, exposing the wound that was half a kai long in front of them. Because she had used enough force, The flesh on both sides split open. Large amounts of blood flowed out and flowed to the ground. Woo woo. The mute girl's eyes were about to tear. Pan Gui's tears flowed like a spring. Ning Shu smiled weakly at her and nodded comfortingly. Then she said, "This blade has already been cut, my sincerity should be enough, right? Let her go, my little life is up to you." Ha ha ha. Good good good, you really are honest. I see your sincerity, it's the first time I've seen such a smart and vicious woman like you. TSK TSK, it would be a pity to kill you directly. How about this, I'll be kind and give you another chance. Didn't you want to be the savior and living bodhisattva? Look at those people in the yard, you wanted to save them and fall out with me, but what about them? For their own survival, they almost wanted to work together to kill you. You racked your brains and planned to kill so many of my brothers to pave a way for them to live. They didn't even care about you and ran away first. Just a group of ungrateful things. Is it worth it for you to go through fire and water for them? I feel it's not worth it for you. He walked over with a sigh, his hands pressing down on Ning Shu's shoulders and forcing her face to look in the direction of the purgatory outside. In the purgatory, the piles of corpses were already dead. The remaining old and weak soldiers had their tendons broken and were pressed to the ground, kneeling in a row. They cried in the rain but didn't know who to cry for. He grinned and raised his 3 white eyes, saying softly, "Some people are worth living in the world, some people are wasting their lives. Go over and kill them, as long as you kill them for me today, I'll let you and your servant girls go. You are a smart girl, you should make the smartest choice, be good, go." What was the voice of an evil demon? Just like him. Ning Shu's every finger was trembling, unable to control it, every piece of her flesh seemed like it was going to split open. The last bit of blood left her face as she said with hatred and fear, "You want to destroy me." She suddenly realized that this might have been a trap from the beginning to the end. Again and again, he tested her, made a bet with her, made her fall into the abyss again after a short period of success, forced her to harm herself, and finally made her wield a knife to kill people. His purpose was not for money or to vent his anger, but to push her step by step into a desperate situation, shattering her self-confidence, crushing her morals, and trampling on her principles until she was completely destroyed from the inside out. When she listened to him and killed the first innocent passerby, she was no longer herself, but a walking corpse that had lost her soul. She couldn't even face herself. This was even more unbearable than directly killing her. But shouldn't he make a move? Mute Girl had done her best for her the entire journey. Even if she was plotted against, she still stood in front of her without hesitation, in order to prevent her from getting hurt again and again. It wasn't a problem to kill her, but how could she watch someone who cared about her lose her precious life because of her? What to do? What should she do? Because of the immense pain, she clenched her fists, and more blood gushed out from her wounds. Let me faint, or let me die right now. That way, I won't have to face this kind of dilemma. In a flash, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. You guys aren't simple bandits, who are you guys? Chapter 475. Appreciating her painful expression, that person laughed strangely. Weren't you the one who said we were bandits? Why are you doubting us now? Ning Shu closed her eyes and told him the truth. I just spoke nonsense. I just roughly guessed that you weren't a good person and heard the footsteps outside the temple, so I had a vague guess. In order to make other people believe, I just made up a few words. Then why did you say you were Ning Shu? I also spoke nonsense. I lost my memory and don't remember who I am. I just heard you tell a story and casually borrowed a name to scare you guys. I'm not that Ning family's eldest miss, I'm just a merchant girl who fell into a brothel. Interesting, interesting. You actually don't remember who you are. If Master knew, he would go crazy with joy. Ha 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 ha. He laughed enough before stopping. He didn't plan on revealing his true identity. It's not important who we are. What's important is that your servant girl is about to die. Her life is in your hands. Hurry up and make a decision. My patience is running out. He raised his foot and stomped on the mute girl's back. He stomped on her neck until she spat out black and red blood. Her breathing became weaker and weaker. Ning Shu's eyes trembled violently. The crimson water in the corners of her eyes rippled. She forcefully closed her eyes and picked up the sword that was stained with her blood again, walking out of the temple step by step. It really was a heavy downpour. It was clearly close to Yin, but the sky didn't look like it was about to brighten. The sun was completely stuck in the jar as if it would never be bright again. Her entire body was soaked by the rain. The wounds on her arms were washed away by the water. Pater pater, the water spread and mixed with the red blood flowing out of the old uncle's corpse. The people kneeling in the blood shook their heads at her in fear. No, don't. We know we were wrong. We shouldn't have abandoned you. Please don't kill us. Please. Someone had personally witnessed the deaths of others and was already half crazy. His forehead hit the mud. Don't kill me, don't kill me. I don't want to die. There were two voices in her head fiercely tugging at each other. One was saying, don't you see? The mute girl is about to die. After her death, it would be Pan Gui and Uncle Zhong. Originally, they didn't have to die and could have escaped together. It was because of your arrogance and recklessness that you wanted to be the savior that they were dragged into this quagmire alive. Do you really want to kill them before you're willing? Quick, take action while there's still time. As long as you take action, the mute girl won't have to die. Save as many as you can. The other one was saying, what right do you have to decide for others whether they live or die? Everyone had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. No one was a saint, so it was understandable that these people ran away. Moreover, they were ordinary civilians without the strength to truss a chicken. What was wrong with that? When your hands are stained with blood, how are you any different from these bandits? This one continued to argue, do you think that if you don't kill them, they will live? Don't be naive. Even if you don't make a move, those bandits won't let them leave alive. Since that's the case, why waste a chance of survival by doing something useless? Idiot. Indecisiveness will only lead to total destruction. That one cursed loudly. You clearly know that the other side deliberately designed this, yet you still jump into the trap. Aren't you falling into the other side's trap? Even if you save the mute girl and the others, you will live worse than pigs and dogs for the rest of your lives. Another one laughed sinisterly. Only when people are alive can they achieve great things. If they die, then there's nothing left. In any case, they won't live. You kill them first and avenge them in the future. Isn't it the same? Maybe they will be grateful to you in the underworld. Tears unconsciously fell from her eyes. The hand holding the sword trembled incessantly. She looked at the same tearful, pleading eyes in front of her. When the tip of the knife was slowly raised, she suddenly heard a child's cry. Jie, don't kill Qi. Qi is scared. Jie, I beg you. Qi, such a familiar name. It seemed that she once had a younger brother with a similar name. After making a mistake, he would softly lean into her arms like a kitten and act spoiled, pretending to beg for mercy. Jie, I know I was wrong. I beg you to forgive Jie this time. Don't be angry anymore. The pit of her stomach was severely torn. The tip of the knife that had just been raised fell to the ground. Ning Shu fiercely closed her eyes. More tears flowed down like ripples. Mute girl, Pan Gui, Uncle Zhong, I'm sorry. I can't do it. You hate me. On the road to the underworld, I'll be your cow and horse to apologize. Pan Gui and the others also shed tears and gave up. Miss, don't say that. We failed to live up to Madam's trust. We didn't take good care of you. Instead, we let you fall into this situation. We have sinned deeply. We deserve to die. Ning Shu looked back and shook her head with a smile. Both of them felt relieved. But she didn't expect that the moment she turned her head, the crying boy kneeling in front of her suddenly stood up, grabbed a dagger and stabbed her waist. Chapter 476. 10 miles away, Xiahou Qing felt a sharp pain in his chest. He fell down from the horse and fell into the rain pond. Young master, Hui Mo and others immediately jumped down from the horse and ran to help him up. His forehead was hot and his body was soaked by the rain. He was as cold as ice. The black satin in his hand had already floated into the rain. His eyelashes were full of water drops. He grabbed his heart and said, something happened to her. Help me get on the horse. After feeling his pulse, Hui Mo stared at his neck in shock. He turned his head and held back the sadness in his throat. He shook his head and said, "No, you can't go on. If you go on like this, something will happen to you before we find Lady Ning." He felt like there were 10,000 needles wandering in his limbs and bones. As long as he took a breath, he would pass out. Xiahou Qing fiercely grabbed his chest. 5 bloody fingerprints came out from his robe and mixed with the pouring rain. He had a hunch that something happened to her. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in so much pain. Ning Shu, he said in a hoarse voice, "Are you going to disobey my words? Juicy, help me, get up." Even Juicy, who was usually the most obedient, didn't move this time. Hui Mo finally couldn't hold back his cry, "Young master, I'll take whatever you want to punish me, but tonight, you really can't force yourself anymore. Do you know that you will really die?" Xiahou Qing had a vague premonition. He calmed down and reached out to touch the side of his neck. Then he said softly, "It's here, isn't it?" Hui Mo's lips trembled violently. He couldn't help but cover his eyes. Under the dim glaze lamp, he could see that on the side of Xiahou Qing's snow-white neck, beside the 3 blood-red plum blossoms that were silently blooming, a streak of blood was vaguely growing out. The veins that looked like petals were slowly extending in all directions, and the 4th petal was about to blossom in the near future. But it shouldn't be. There were 7 years between the 1st petal and the 2nd. From the 2nd petal to the 3rd, there was a gap of 3 years. Even if it continued to grow at this speed, it would take at least a year for the next plum blossom to grow. It had only been a year. With the speed of development, not to mention 25 years old, it is very likely that next year. Why did the heavens have to torture such a good heir like him? The great grief made Hui Mo want to cry out loud, but he didn't dare to make a sound because Shizzy was present. He bit the back of his hand so hard that it bled, but he didn't let himself cry out loud. "Let it come. I've been waiting for it for a long time." Xiahou Qing laughed lightly, as if he didn't put it in his eyes at all. "This kind of fate is within my expectations. It's just a matter of time. What's there to be surprised about?" In the past 11 years, I've been haunted by it, tortured by it, and almost defeated by it time and time again. My life was once firmly bound by it. I fell into a state of paranoia and was unable to break free. It wasn't until I met her that I broke free from that dark rope little by little. For so many years, I fought with it and was not killed by it. It's just the beginning of the 4th petal. If you have the ability, take my life away. If you can't, as long as I'm still alive, I must find Ning Shu. Hui Mo finally couldn't help crying out loud. He cried heartbreakingly like a child. Ju Sai, Shi Yang and others also had red eyes. They clenched their fists and cried silently. After crying in a hurry, Hui Mo raised his sleeve to wipe his tears. He bent down and carried Xiahou Qing on his back. "Okay, Shizzy, as long as I'm still alive, even if I have to carry you, I will definitely help you find Lady Ning." Chapter 477. Hui Mo took off the raincoat on his body and covered his master tightly. Then he helped him to get on the horse. Behind them, a light carriage came in the wind and rain and stopped behind them. A person in a snow-white palace dress came down from the carriage. Hui Mo looked back and saw who the person in the snow-white palace dress was. He was surprised and said, "13th Princess. Why are you here?" Xiao Zhangping's snow-white palace dress fluttered in the heavy rain. Soon, it was soaked and stuck to her body. The palace maid held an umbrella for her, but she pushed it away. She looked at them with tears in the corner of her eyes and said, "I chased you all the way. Xiahou Shizzy, give up, don't chase anymore." Hearing her voice, Xiahou Qing suppressed his cough and said distantly, "What's the reason? How can you chase after her like this?" Xiao Zhongping looked at his pale face and cried, "Anne, it's useless. Even if you catch up with her, it's useless. Instead, it will hurt her." Xiahou Qing's tone was full of distance. He was no longer as tolerant as before. It was as if he was talking to a stranger. "If it weren't for you, she wouldn't be in danger. Why should I believe you?" In the face of such an indifferent face, Xiao Zhongping subconsciously dodged. But Ju Sai and the others had the same look. Even Hui Mo, who handed her a handkerchief in the moonlight night and asked her not to cry, looked at her with full of vigilance. This feeling of being isolated and hostile by everyone made Xiao Zhongping's heart very uncomfortable. She opened her mouth and wanted to defend herself. But after she opened her mouth, she couldn't say anything. Xiahou Qing no longer cared about her and said in a hoarse voice, "Let's go." Looking at their backs, Xiao Zhongping clenched her fists and finally couldn't help but say the truth loudly. "I'm telling the truth. It's not someone else who stole her, it's her mother and Princess Xin." Hui Mo immediately reined his horse, turned back and said, "What? Is it true?" This was too inconceivable. They have been investigating the murderer of Lady Ning, but it turned out to be her mother. Is the rain too heavy or the night too late that he heard it wrong? He subconsciously said, "How is this possible? Are you talking nonsense? You're trying to lie to us again." Xiao Zhongping shook his head vigorously to prove himself. "I didn't. If what I said just now is a lie, then let me die alone and without love in this lifetime." Huemo's heart moved. He subconsciously took a step closer to her, but he pulled the reins back to his original position. He tried to maintain a cold face and said, "We trusted you before, but you still lied to us. How can I dare to believe you again?" Xiao Zhongping's face paled even more. The rain had already soaked her cloud-like hair, making her look bleak and pitiful. "I really didn't lie to you this time. Believe me this time. Everything I said is true." That night, after discussing with you how to escape the marriage, I hurried back to the palace. On the way back, I met Princess He Xin, who was blocking my way. She proposed a deal to me, as long as I helped her complete this plan, creating the illusion that Ning Shu had suddenly died, and then quietly sending Ning Shu out of the capital, leaving Great Yu, she would help me solve the marriage dilemma. At first, I didn't want to agree because I really couldn't understand her purpose. But no matter how I asked, she refused to tell me the reason. Under my repeated questioning, she directly knelt in front of me and said that as long as Ning Shu stayed in the capital for a day, her life would be in danger at any time. Now the only person who could help her was me. Seeing her like that, I thought of my own mother. She looked at me with similar eyes before she died. "I'm sorry, Prince Xiahou. I know that as long as I agree, I will betray your trust and make you fall into pain. But I really can't refuse." And she bit her lips, unable to speak. She didn't dare to say the unbearable words. But at that time, she did have selfish motives. Seeing him snuggling with her, she felt like her heart was being cut by a knife. She really couldn't accept it. At that moment, the dark voice in her heart defeated all her hesitation. If Ning Shu disappeared, then would she and Prince Xiahou still have a chance? This was the person she had been thinking about for nearly 12 years. How could she be willing to let go? She generously wished him and another woman to be together forever. Chapter 478. Xiao Zhongping's expression was so sincere and urgent that it didn't seem like he was lying at all. Hui Mo looked at his young master hesitantly and saw that his young master wasn't surprised at all after hearing his words. Instead, he opened his mouth very calmly and said a few words. "I guessed it." "You already guessed it?" Xiao Zhongping murmured. The sound of the rain covered Xiahou Qing's suppressed coughs. Like a curtain of smoke, it made his face and voice appear hazy. However, the rain was also like a jade knife, sharpening the calmness and determination in his bones to the point that it could be seen clearly. Cough, cough. He started to analyze coldly. "When I heard the bad news yesterday, I was shocked and could not think. Until I rode the horse this way, I calmed down and thought carefully. The flaws in the plan appeared one by one. The first flaw was, a mother, when she learned that her most beloved daughter had suddenly died and the cause of death was suspicious, her first reaction, other than grief, should be anger. She should want to immediately catch the culprit and take revenge for her daughter. But at the time, other than crying in grief, she did not have any other reaction. Even Duke Ning was silent. No one asked for an investigation. It was as if they all silently accepted that it was an accident. The second flaw was Zigui. Zigui was the personal secret guard that Duke Ning had sent to her. He was also a death guard. Unless there were special arrangements, he would not be more than 10 feet away from her. And they had a close relationship. Zigui had risked his life for her more than once and almost died. Under this premise, after hearing the news of her death, Zigui would appear to grieve for her and do his best to find the cause. But she disappeared. From yesterday when Ning Shu entered the palace until now, she had not appeared once. This was not normal. It was thought-provoking. And the last floor, Princess Wu. When I went to the courier station to ask but to no avail, she said something to me. She said, "These years are too long. The only thing I understand is some things are predestined. Perhaps separation is the best arrangement for everyone." She also advised me not to force things. She had no enmity with us, so why did she help the other party hide Ning Shu's tracks? She also repeatedly advised me not to chase after her, as if she firmly believed that Ning Shu was not in danger. There was only one explanation. In her mind, the person who stole Ning Shu was someone who would never hurt her and had her best interests at heart. After combining the 3 flaws, the final answer isn't hard to guess. Other than Ning Shu's mother, I can't think of anyone else who is more suitable. His reasoning was so clear that he had almost described the outline of the matter clearly. Xiao Zhongping clenched his fist and asked, "Since you have guessed it, why do you still insist on chasing after him?" "Maybe letting her go is the best thing for her." "Impossible." Xiahou Qing sneered, stubbornly refusing. If running away was useful, then the curse that had been binding her since she was 10 years old and the 4th plum petal that was about to grow on the side of her neck would be laughable. Princess Hixin had taken such a huge risk to send Ning Shu away. This proved that the person hiding in the dark was ready to make a move and was ready to strike. For so many years, that person had played them in the palm of his hand. How could he let Ning Shu leave Great Yu so easily? Princess Hixin wanted to play the game of a cicada escaping, but the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Instead, she might fall into the other party's trap. When he thought that she might be in a place where he could not see, suffering terrible injuries and inhumane torture, his 5 viscera and 6 bowels were stirred up in pain. Death was near. She was the only light in his dark life. He would never allow this light to be taken away by others. In this world, only I can protect her. As long as I am alive, she can only stay by my side. She is not allowed to go anywhere. Huemore, continue on your way. Chapter 479. Xiao Zhongping was deeply shocked by his words. Large teardrops rolled out of her eyes. She didn't know if she was moved or if she finally accepted it. It was impossible. Even until death, it was impossible between her and Xiahou Qing. Her emotions made her close her eyes and say loudly, "You said you could protect her, but now you can't even protect yourself. If you continue like this, you might fall first." On the horse, Xiahou Qing's lips curved slightly, as if he didn't care about his own life and death. "Then I will die before her and pave the way for her to go to the underworld." In the ruined temple, Ning Shu's waist was pierced by a knife. She spat out a mouthful of blood. In an instant, the sky darkened and she seemed to see the familiar road to the underworld waving at her again. "Miss." Pan Gui wanted to rush over, but was hit by a bandit on the back and tied to kneel on the ground. The corners of Ning Shu's mouth twitched as she looked back in disbelief. The child let go of his hand, trembling in fear. He pointed behind him and cried as he retreated, "Sorry, sorry." She said, "As long as I kill you, she will let my father go. Chia can't live without a father." "Sister, sorry." Behind him, a person walked out from the darkness and pressed on his small shoulder, laughing softly. Her voice was hoarse. It was the she that the child spoke of. The peddler and the others immediately bowed. "Master." She waved her hand casually and raised her head, revealing a masked face under the cloak. She bent down and praised the crying boy. "Child, you did well. Your father's life was saved because of you. You are a good child. Now, stab her again and I will let you go. This way, you and your father can go home alive." The voice was very ghostly, like a demon bewitching people. The child cried in fear, But in the blink of an eye, another knife stabbed her. But because the knife was trembling so much, it went crooked and left a slanted wound. Ning Shu slapped it away. The child stumbled to his father and cried. Hearing the satisfied laughter of the master, ha 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 ha, she waved her sleeves and the bandits kindly let the father and son leave the ruined temple. Half of Ning Shu's body was numb, the intense pain was like needles, densely pricking her nerves, making her want to cry out in pain. But what was more painful was the beating heart in her chest. She covered the wound and coughed out blood, but she clenched her teeth and swallowed it. She raised her head, her eyes burning. You, who are you? Who are you? How did I offend you? Who am I? Good question. Under the mask, the woman's voice was low and muffled. She paced slowly in front of Ning Shu. I'm a person who watched you grow up. Perhaps you have never known of my existence, but I have witnessed every stage of your growth with my own eyes. I have watched you grow from a fair and soft baby who could smile as soon as you were born into an intelligent and adorable little girl who would fight for justice. I have watched you grow from a 3 feet tall little girl into a slender, elegant, determined, and resolute young lady. I have watched you grow from being cursed and ostracized by all the people in the city. You hid in a corner and cried quietly. Later on, you calmed down and quietly grew. You took charge of solving big cases one after another and stole the limelight. For these 16 years and 9 months, I have been quietly accompanying you in the dark, my good child. In the heavy rain, she stood behind her and gently stroked her soft hair, whispering and chuckling, like a kind elder, but also like a breathing ghost who stepped on bloody footprints and crawled out of the abyss of fire step by step. Chapter 480. Facing such a person, Ning Shu felt a sense of fear for the first time in her life. She was like a bird flapping its wings. She thought that the sky was high and she could do whatever she wanted. She even wanted to fight against fate, but she didn't expect that she was actually locked in a huge birdcage. The owner of the birdcage had been standing outside the cage quietly watching her. He watched her toss and turn, watching her jump around as if he was looking at a toy to relieve boredom. When he was tired of watching, he reached out and opened the door of the birdcage. He grabbed the bird that didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and strangled it to death. Appreciating the shock and fear in her eyes that couldn't be hidden, she slowly smiled. The hand that stroked her hair was like a poisonous tongue, gently stroking her face as if admiring a very precious porcelain ornament. You are too similar to me when I was young. It's like God created another me. Sometimes looking at you, it's like watching my own journey of growth. I grew up willfully and freely, free and unrestrained, just like how I should have been. So on one hand, I wanted to destroy you, but on the other hand, I couldn't bear to do it. On the other hand, I couldn't bear to do it, but I had to destroy you. Originally, I was going to appear on your birthday to give you a surprise, but I didn't expect you to almost slip away from me. But God helped me and let me find you. It seems that you and I are destined to be entangled together. Wave after wave of coldness, like rain falling on her body, continuously took away her body's temperature from the wounds on her body, making her feel cold to the bone. She said, "Why? What kind of long-cherished wish do we have? Why won't you let me go? You're trying to get information out of me and find clues to my identity from my words, aren't you? Good child, don't worry. You will never know who I am, unless you die." After she said softly, she retracted her hand and retreated back into the dark rain. She raised her hand and said loudly, "For the sake of our past relationship, I gave you a few chances just now, but you didn't cherish them. Now, the choice is back to them. Come, those who want to live, pick up the saber, sword, or dagger beside you and stab her. As long as you stab her, you can leave safely like the father and son." The people who were kneeling on the ground and pacing back and forth on the edge of despair all felt as if they had been kicked back to the human world after hearing this sound. They were both shocked and full of anticipation. Really? In the crowd, the old man who was scared out of his wits shook his wet white beard and stammered. She smiled, and the emotionless eyes behind the mask coldly glanced at him. "Why don't you try and find out? It's not like the knife is stabbing you anyway. The old man picked up a broken knife from the side and walked over to Ning Shu. He looked at her guiltily and shyly before closing his eyes and stabbing her with the knife without saying anything. Ning Shu dodged backwards, but dozens of hands lunged at her from all directions like bloodthirsty hyenas. Even the person who had stood up for her twice in a row now stood in front of her with red eyes and a knife in his hand. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really scared out of my wits. Death is too scary. It's really too scary. Anyway, she said that as long as I stab you once, she would let us live. She didn't say if it would be deep or shallow. I'm sorry. I swear I'll just stab you gently, really gently. You won't feel the pain, okay?" Then, one stab after another, gently, heavily, crazily, sorrowfully. Dozens of broken knives, daggers, and even a sharp and slender stone were all stabbed at her. She wanted to escape, but her hands and feet were held down by the crowd and she couldn't escape. After one person finished stabbing and got her pardon, the others were like cockroaches that smelled blood and rushed at her even more crazily. She screamed in pain silently. Pain. It was 1,000 times more painful than being skinned alive. Who could save her, or just let her die? Chapter 481. Her entire body was like a broken sieve with countless holes. Air was leaking from every part of her body. Countless layers of pain stacked together. She couldn't even scream. But she was still clinging to her like a demon, refusing to let go. Do you see? People in this world are all like this. One moment, they're righteous, playing the role of a loyal official. The next moment, for their own interests, what etiquette, honor, loyalty, these sanctimonious things can all be abandoned. Does it hurt? If it hurts, then cry. Cry for me to hear. Ning Shu's throat kept spitting out blood foam. It was as if her internal organs were crushed and were about to flow out of her mouth. She shouted with tears rolling down her face, "Get her out. I won't cry. I won't cry for you even if I die." Miss Pan Gui's ears were bleeding. He used all his strength to break free from the ropes and rushed to her. Seeing Pan Gui's whirlpool-like eyes, she paused for a moment. Then she sneered and waved her sleeve to slap her away. "You dare to embarrass yourself in front of me with such insignificant skills? You're asking for death." Pan Gui was heavily injured by the slap. He lay on the ground dying. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. What was the feeling of being powerless? In front of absolute power, they were like ants. No matter how they jumped, it was just a joke. Hot tears flowed out and mixed into the rain. Ning Shu shouted, "Kill me if you can." She shook her head sarcastically. "No, I won't do that. Death isn't a punishment to you, but a reward. My good child, how could I let you end all the pain that I've suffered for so many years so easily? Do you hate me? No, you should hate these people in front of you. Hate this world. You've been trying to figure out who you are all this time, right? Let me tell you, you're Ning Shu, Duke Ning's eldest daughter. The medicine you were drugged with, your memories were erased, including your identity being erased and thrown out of you. It's all thanks to your birth mother. Do you find it unbelievable? Let me tell you, it's true, it's the truth. The reason why you were so easily plotted against was actually because your mother personally poisoned your soup. You can ask your maidservant who pretends to be deaf and mute if this is the case." Ning Shu thought that she could no longer feel pain, but when she heard these words, she suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. She stared with bloodshot eyes and tried her best to deny. "No, impossible, I don't believe it." The mute girl's acupoints were unsealed. Facing her interrogation, she shook her head desperately with tears in her eyes. "No, no. The princess is doing all this for you, miss. You must not believe her nonsense." But when she opened her mouth and said the first word, the light in Ning Shu's eyes dimmed. She was still trying to sow discord. "Listen, her identity as a mute girl is fake. Everyone is working together to play you in circles." The mute girl, also known as Zi Gui, cried bitterly and defended herself. "No, this subordinate did not lie to you on purpose. This subordinate was afraid that you would recognize my voice and awaken your memories. This subordinate had no choice. Miss, You must not listen to her. You must not. She casually raised her hand. Then can you deny the fact that her mother personally put poison in her soup and coaxed her to drink it? Zigui's lips trembled, unable to refute. In this short moment of hesitation, something in Ning Shu's heart turned to ash, no longer warm. She shook her head, looking down at Ning Shu, who was in a pool of blood, with pity. So pitiful, your birth mother betrayed you. Perhaps you should call me mother and let me dote on you. Yes. It's that hateful gaze. Hate, hate, hate. You wish you could drink human blood and eat human flesh, and kill all those who betrayed you. Hate, hate, quickly become the second me. After more and more people finished stabbing her, they hurriedly threw down their knives and ran away, leaving only 2 or 3 people. The people who held her hands and feet left one after another, but it was useless. The last time she felt pain and could even move her fingers was a long time ago. Now she could only close her eyes and silently hope. What is the taste of death? I beg you, quickly come and find me. Then, she was finally satisfied and lost consciousness. Miss. Zigui cried until the corners of his eyes were bleeding. He looked at her with the most hateful and most fearful gaze in the world. Demon. You beast. Demon. TSK. Duke Ning's hidden guards are a bit interesting. You're called Zigui, right? To prevent her from recognizing you, you purposely pretended to be a little mute. It's been hard on you. How about this? Since you like to pretend to be a mute, this consort will fulfill your wish. From now on, you can be a real mute with peace of mind, ha ha ha. Zigui's chin was forcefully pried open. He felt a chill at the bottom of his tongue. Something in this life had completely left him. After doing all this, she threw away the pink piece of meat in her hand with waning interest. She turned to look at Ning Shu, who was lying in a pool of blood like a tattered doll, using a handkerchief to carefully wipe her blood-stained hands. This game should end. The last person stared with bloodshot eyes at Ning Shu's heart, which was the only intact part of her body, and raised the dagger high up. Chapter 482. A cloud-piercing arrow pierced through the thick curtain of rain and hit him between the eyebrows. He was killed and fell into the pool of water. She immediately retreated behind the human wall and turned back coldly. Behind the curtain of rain, Shi Yang held a bow in one hand and an arrow in the other. He said loudly, I am the first general under Xiahou Qing, the son of Prince Nanping. If you want to live, quickly kneel down and beg for mercy. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the horses coming out from behind the rain and fog. Unknowingly, they gradually surrounded them. Unknowingly, the rain gradually became lighter and the sky finally showed a little bit of light. Although it was weak, it was not far from dawn. She judged the strength of both sides and glanced at Xiahou Qing. You can save her today. How can you save yourself in the future? Xiahou Qing said hoarsely, Don't worry. Even if I can't save myself, I will drag you to hell with me. She raised her head and laughed. Ha 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 ha. Good, good, good. You are indeed his son. Then I will wait for that day. I hope that before that day comes, you will not all die. She decisively hid in the middle of the crowd and said one word, kill. The group of people disguised as bandits finally bared their bloody fangs. Like men of sacrifice who knew no pain, they fought against the guards of Lord Nanping's mansion. They allowed the eyeless swords and sabers to stab their bodies. Their blood flowed all over the ground, but they remained indifferent until they died and fell to the ground. Even though the guards of Prince Nanping's mansion were well trained, they were a little restrained in the face of such a group of zombies. They could only watch she rush out of the encirclement surrounded by her confidants. Shi Yang was not convinced and chased with an arrow. He was stopped by Juicy. Don't chase a desperate enemy. Be careful of traps. It is more important to save Lady Ning. Shi Yang turned back unwillingly and cleaned up the remaining people. With the help of Hui Mo, Xiahou Qing anxiously got off the horse and killed all the men of sacrifice who tried to stop him. He stepped on the road paved by the corpses and walked step by step to Ning Shu. When he saw the situation of Ning Shu's body, Hui Mo took a breath and subconsciously stopped his young master. He trembled. No. Don't touch it. Xiahou Qing's hand trembled as he asked, What's wrong? Hui Mo didn't answer, or he didn't know how to answer. He immediately leaned over to feel her breath. There was only a wisp of breath left. He had examined so many corpses and treated countless injured people, but he had never seen someone like this. There was not a single piece of flesh on her body that was unharmed. There were more than 10 or even 20 wounds on her body, and every wound was so deep that the bones could be seen. Every wound was oozing blood, and her clothes had long been dyed red with blood. The parts that were most heavily injured had turned white after being soaked in the rain for a long time. They were rolled up to the sides, revealing the bright red flesh inside. Even if he wanted to reach out, he didn't know where to touch. He was afraid that the strained spider silk would break if someone touched it lightly. Hui Mo's eyes turned red in an instant. He turned his face away and didn't dare to look. What had Lady Ning suffered? How could he describe her current appearance to his Shizzy? He couldn't bear to say a single word. Xiahou Qing seemed to have a premonition. He stretched out his hands and gently touched her quiet and obedient body a few times. When he felt that his hands were full of smoothness, his throat violently rolled a few times. His eyes, which had not been conscious for a long time, became hot and slowly rolled down along the red corner of his eyes. He bent his knees and let his robe soak in the pool of blood and mud. He stretched out his hands and wanted to help her up, but he didn't know how to do it. He opened his arms and wanted to hug her, but he didn't know where to put his hands. Finally, he could only lower his head and touch her cold forehead. A drop of hot tears fell on her eyes. "Sorry, Xiaoshu, I'm late, sorry, don't be afraid, I'll take you home." Chapter 483. He stretched out his trembling hand and carefully picked up her broken body. But no matter how careful he was, he still affected her wound and new blood flowed out. But even so, she didn't react at all. Great fear made him see a bloody mist. He didn't dare to imagine that if he came a moment later, maybe a moment later, he would lose her forever. His Xiao Shu was only 16 years old. A young girl's most delicate and beautiful age. He held her in his hand and was afraid she would fall. However, he had accidentally lost her and even caused her to be hurt like this. His heart was torn apart. He couldn't help but cough twice and spit out a mouthful of blood. Hui Mo couldn't bear to watch. He stretched out his hand and cried, "Shiziyi, let me do it." Xia Hu shook his head lightly and held Ning Shu in his arms like she was a treasure. Passing through the pools of blood and the cold rain, passing through the shadows of swords and sabers, passing through the ruins of the ruined temple, he carried her out step by step. Xiao Zhangping's carriage was far behind. When she stopped at the door and saw Ning Shu's condition, her pupils shrank. She couldn't bear to look away. She bit her lips and said, "Carry her into my carriage. The horse's back is bumpy. Her injuries won't be able to bear it." She was worried that Xiahou Qing would be angry at her and refuse. She didn't expect him to think for a moment and not be stubborn. He said coldly and politely, "Thank you." He was polite and distant, like a stranger. Xiao Zhangping's heart was sour. She knew that once something was lost, it couldn't be returned. Ju Sai led a group of guards to kneel in front of the ruined temple. "Shiziyi, these are the people who just ran out of the ruined temple." They identified each other. Lady Ning's injuries were caused by them. They each had a knife. None of them can escape. Xiahou Qing suddenly turned his head and opened his eyes. There was no light in his clear black and white eyes, but they were darker than the night and sharper than a knife. In the eyes of the world, the Crown Prince of Nanping was handsome and elegant like an immortal. However, this immortal could also turn into a demon because of anger. With blood at the corner of his mouth, he said word by word, "Kill everyone here. Don't leave anyone who has hurt her alive." "Yes." After clearing out all the death warriors, Shi Yang wiped the sweat off his forehead. Tian Fang finally spat out a mouthful of white. The rain finally stopped completely. The sun pushed the clouds away, eager to go out. In the dim light, he suddenly saw a familiar figure under 3 or 4 corpses. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately dug up the corpses like a madman, digging out the person buried underneath. Because she had been soaking in the water for a long time, the mask on her face had cracked. She took it off gently, revealing her delicate and pretty face. Tigress, wake up. Aren't you a secret guard? How could you be injured so easily? TSK, no matter how fierce she pretended to be, she was still a woman. Women needed men to protect them. Seeing that it's rare for you to be so weak, don't worry, I'm here to save you. But this time, you can't accuse me of taking advantage of you. Hee. But no matter how he deliberately provoked her to make her angry, trying to force out her usual fierce and lively appearance, she didn't react this time. She could only weakly open her eyes, silently and sadly looking at him. Her mouth was full of blood. A bad premonition surged in his heart. Shi Yang's expression changed. He gently opened her mouth, and then the world was split into two. Where's your tongue? Tell me where it is, I'll help you find it. He was like a soulless wild dog, rummaging around on the ground. He laughed foolishly. Don't worry, I can find it. I can definitely find it. Hui Mo's medical skills are very good. It's not a problem for him to heal the dead. When I find it, I'll ask him to sew it back. You have such a good mouth, how can you become a mute? I won't agree. Zigui reached out and gently pulled him back. Shi Yang trembled. He raised his head and covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook silently. Chapter 484. In the Duke Ning, Princess Hashin was sitting under the oil lamp, quietly lost in thought. She was gently rubbing a string of Buddhist beads in her hand. Suddenly, it fell to the ground with a bang. One of the Buddhist beads broke into two pieces. Princess Hashin panicked and immediately bent down to pick up the Buddhist beads. However, she found that no matter how she tried to piece it back together, she could not put the broken Buddhist beads back together. She looked at the Buddhist beads that had an ominous meaning and was in a daze. Ning De Yuan held her panicked hand and comforted her softly. Xin don't be afraid. Shu has Zi Gui and Pan Gui to protect her. They are the best and most loyal among the secret guards. They will not let anything happen to Shu. You don't have to worry. Under the dim candlelight, Princess Hashin's eyes drifted. I always have a bad feeling that something is going to happen. De Yuan, tell me, am I doing the right thing? She grabbed Ning De Yuan's hand and said helplessly, Shu is so smart. She will definitely find out the truth soon. If she knows, I lied to her. I didn't ask for her permission, and I didn't even tell her the truth. I secretly drugged her soup, erased her memories, and sent her to Nanyang. If she finds out about these things one day, will she hate me as her mother? Ning De Yuan held her in his arms and gently stroked her thin back. Xin our beloved daughter is not an unreasonable child. On the contrary, she is intelligent, considerate, and considerate. You have taught her well over the years. Even if she does find out about it one day, she will understand our good intentions. In the past few years, I can clearly feel that His Majesty is more and more wary of us. That person has been doing more and more things in the dark. From Shu marriage to Consort Wen's case, old Consort Yu's case, and the case of the Southern Yang's envoy, one after another, they are all moving in the dark. They are becoming more and more unscrupulous, stirring up the entire imperial court. There are only 3 months left until Shu 17th birthday. She will be in danger at any time. We have no choice but to send her away at this time. That child had always been filial. If he told her the truth, how could she agree to leave? Xin don't feel guilty. Your body is weak, and you've been crying too much these past 2 days. Leaning into her husband's arms, Princess Hashin's eyes became wet again. The huge guilt made it hard for her to breathe. Recently, I often think that if I didn't stop that illness and directly died, maybe the things after that wouldn't have happened. I'm sorry, 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 I'm sorry to all of you. 25 years, it's been 25 years. De Yuan, I'm sorry. Marrying me is the biggest misfortune of your life. Ning Deyuan reached out his warm palm to cover her mouth. Don't say such silly things. If you die, how can we have a future? All these years, you gave me Shu and Ji. Because of you, I have a family. Meeting you is the luckiest thing that happened to me in my life. In this life, you are my wife. In the next life, you will still be my wife. Deyuan. Princess Hixin's tears fell and seeped into his palm. All right. You're already the mother of 2 children. Why are you still crying like a little girl? It was the same when we first met. I accidentally bumped into you on the road. I didn't use much force, but you blinked twice and your tears fell. You cried until the tip of your nose turned red. When I saw it, my heart skipped a beat. It's over. There are no girls in my family. I really don't understand how a girl can be so soft. You cry when I touch you. I repeatedly bowed and apologized to you, but you still couldn't stop crying. So I begged you to stop crying. I will definitely take responsibility for you. I didn't expect you to stop crying and scolded me. Where did this lecture come from? Who told you to take responsibility? Scram. Chapter 485. Ning Deyuan laughed as he spoke, causing Hixin's tears to stop. Her tears turned into laughter. I've been afraid of pain since I was young. If someone touched me, I would get a big bruise on my body and it would hurt for a long time. Who knows how a brute like you would walk without eyes? Wherever I tried to hide, you would bump into me. You even said that you would take responsibility. Aren't you a lecher? What's worse is that after I met you, nothing good happened every time. Ning Deyuan continued to laugh. He held the back of her head and pressed it against his chest. He recalled the past. That's right, I'm a lecher. Once you scolded me, my bones would become frivolous and the more I wanted to be in front of you. When I made you cry, you glared at me and scolded me a few times. My heart was sour and painful, but I couldn't help but feel happy at the same time. Later on, I found out that the reason you loved to cry was not because you were delicate, but because you were born with a constitution. But you were such a person who was afraid of pain. In order to continue my bloodline, you stubbornly insisted on walking to the gates of hell again and again. How can I be grateful and cherish you? Hixin whispered, meeting you is also the best thing that happened to me in my life. I only hope that our children can be well. As for myself, why should I be afraid of death? Ning Deyuan held her hand. All right, I'll be with you on the road to the Yellow Springs. Now, my little girl, you should rest. Your husband will accompany you. All right, but let's go see Jia first. These 2 days, the little guy was scared to death. I'm afraid he will kick the blanket and cry at night. The 2 of them looked at each other and smiled. They supported each other as they walked through a winding vermilion corridor. They then stepped on the stones of the stream and walked to the southern courtyard. Hixin hugged Ji's soft white body in her arms and coaxed him softly. Ning Deyuan also leaned over and stroked him a few times. He saw Forsythia stumbling all the way over with a pale face. Ning Deyuan blocked Hixin's line of sight first. He lifted his chin and ordered Forsythia to walk to the side. He lowered his voice and asked, Forsythia, why are you so flustered? Did you receive any news? Forsythia's voice was trembling. I sent out a carrier pigeon in the evening, but I still haven't received a reply. I waited anxiously at the back door for a long time, and then a little beggar with unkempt hair ran over and gave me this box. Master, look. Ning Deyuan immediately took the box and opened it. He saw a piece of bloody meat inside, followed by a letter written in blood-red characters. The letter was painted with speckles of golden plum blossoms, and in the center of the cluster of plum blossoms were 3 big words, begin. When he saw these things clearly, Ning Deyuan immediately closed the box, but he was still a step too late. Hixin's footsteps faltered, and she collapsed on the ground. Xin, don't scare yourself. Maybe the other party purposely set up a trap to scare us. She's tricking us. There's nothing in this box that can prove that something happened to Shu. Princess Hixin trembled and clutched her chest tightly. I have a premonition. I have a premonition since just now. Shu, My Shu must have been in trouble. I'm the one who harmed her. I thought I was smart, but I harmed her instead. De don't stop me. I'm going to find her. I want to save my daughter. Xin don't be agitated. I'll go with you. Princess Xin did not listen to anything. She stubbornly broke into the stable and struggled to get on the horse's back. She rushed towards the door, but was surrounded by a group of soldiers. Ning De caught up and took a closer look. He then shielded Xin behind him. Oh, it's Eunuch Zhao. I didn't know Eunuch Zhao would come so late at night. Please don't take offense. Haha, I wonder why Eunuch Zhao has brought so many brothers to my small public house. Zhao Bin was indifferent to his politeness. He held the imperial edict and ordered, Princess Xin is bold and presumptuous. She plotted against the royal family. Her crime is unforgivable. The evidence is conclusive. She will be immediately sent to the imperial prison to await her punishment. If she dares to disobey, her whole family will be executed. Chapter 486. The carriage rushed all the way. In order to prevent Ning Shu's wounds from being further torn, Xiao Qing held her carefully in his arms and refused to let her go for a moment. Outside the carriage, Xiao Zhongping pulled the reins awkwardly. She turned back and said, on the way here, there is a small town called Baijia Town in front of us. There should be a medical center and an inn. Let's rest there for a while and treat their wounds. Baijia Town was not big. There were no more than 1,000 families. A straight long street connected restaurants, inns, and merchants. Therefore, it was easy to find a medical center. The carriage stopped in front of the clinic. Without thinking, Hui Mo rushed into the clinic like a gust of wind and plundered all the precious herbs, furnaces, and other things inside. Juicy divided his men into 2 groups and booked the largest inn in Baijia Town. He only received them. Xiao Qing carried Ning Shu all the way upstairs. He refused to let others take her. He was paranoid. He was afraid that she would be stolen again if he let go. Only Xiao Zhongping and her maid were women. Hui Mo couldn't offend them. He had to teach Xiao Zhongping how to treat the wounds and asked her to do it for him. Looking at Xiao Qing, who held Ning Shu's hand and refused to let go, Xiao Zhongping said carefully, Shizzy, put her down. I can't apply medicine for her like this. Xiao Qing still held her hand tightly and did not let go. Shizzy Xiao? He finally reacted. He kissed Ning Shu's blood-stained fingers and finally spoke for the first time along the way. If you can save her, I'll give you Xiao Qing's life. Ning Shu's body was covered with wounds and pieces of clothes. She was badly mutilated. Xiao Zhongping only glanced at her and then turned around to run away. Seeing her with a pale face, Hui Mo stepped forward and asked, Princess, can you do it? Xiao Zhongping said, it's just applying medicine and bandaging the wounds. What's there to be afraid of? I, Xiao Zhongping, am not afraid of anything. You wait outside. She took a deep breath and walked into the house again. Xiao Zhongping looked at the person on the bed who was on her last breath and said in a low voice, Ning Shu, it was my fault that I drugged you when you weren't paying attention. Now, I'll make up for it. Let's call it even, okay? You mustn't die. She mustered up her courage and walked forward. Together with Hong Fei, they slowly peeled off Ning Shu's clothes and the flesh that was stuck together. Because of the rain, the clots that had already formed into blood clots were torn apart. Ning Shu was awakened by the immense pain. She opened her eyes abruptly. When she saw the stranger in front of her with her empty eyes, the broken images rushed into her mind again. She lost control and shouted, ah 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 ah. Xiao Qing barged in like a gust of wind. What did you do to her? Xiao Zhongping was scared silly. He shook his head desperately. I didn't do anything. I was changing her clothes when she suddenly woke up. Then she shouted and didn't let us get close. I swear, I really didn't do anything, really. Believe me. Xiaoshu, don't be afraid. Look at me. It's me, Xiao Qing. Don't be afraid of me, okay? Xiao Qing tried to get closer. But in exchange, Ning Shu struggled even more in fear. After being hurt again and again, She could no longer recognize people. She only saw hordes after hordes of repulsive scourges and ferocious beasts, wandering souls and wild ghosts rushing over to drink her blood, cut her flesh, and left bloody holes on her body one after another. Pain, it really hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Don't come over. They are all demons. Demons. Ah 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 ah. She had no other reaction. She could only scream and struggle with all her might. She allowed more blood to flow out and die half of the bed. She allowed herself to walk step by step towards the end of her life. Chapter 487. No one knows how to deal with the current situation. Hui Mo hurriedly said, Lady Ning has lost her mind. No one can recognize her. There is no way to apply medicine to her. If this continues, she will die of blood exhaustion before we can touch her wound. Shizzy, what should we do? Xiahou Qing's veins on the back of his hand were exposed. While she was struggling, he hugged her tightly and pressed her acupuncture points. Her limbs couldn't move, but she could still see and move her mouth. She opened her mouth and bit the shoulder of the devil in front of her. Her teeth were deeply embedded in his shoulder bone. Xiaoshu. Xiaoshu. The corners of his eyes were red as he gently held her in his arms. His hand gently rested on the back of her neck as he hesitated whether or not to pinch her until she fainted. However, in the end, he couldn't bear to do so and let her continue to bite his shoulder until her mouth was full of blood. Xiao Zhongping was stunned. Shizzy, you. Xiahou Qing shook his head. I can't see, so I won't be rude. I want to stay here with her. Princess, please continue. Xiao Zhongping finally realized that there were some things that she couldn't force in this life. She didn't have time to be sentimental. She blinked away the bitterness in her eyes and called Hong Fei. She hurriedly stepped forward to dress Ning Shu's wounds. After a while, the medicine was finally applied. Ning Shu was exhausted and lost consciousness again. But Xiahou Qing's shoulder had been bitten by her. When Hui Mo came in and saw his shoulder, he took a deep breath. Shizzy. Xiahou Qing didn't care. He frowned and said, Don't look at me, look at her. How is she now? Yes. Hui Mo answered in a low voice and immediately bent down to check her injuries. He also checked her pulse. He frowned and said with difficulty, Lady Ning's shallow wounds have temporarily stopped bleeding, but the deep wounds are still bleeding. There are no precious medicines in Baijia town. The medicine I made can only solve the urgent problem. As for whether she can safely survive this, maybe, it depends on her luck. What he didn't say was that if someone else had suffered so many injuries, they probably wouldn't have been able to survive. The fact that Ning Shu still had a trace of her mayfly-like aura was already a blessing from the heavens. Xiahou Qing's eyebrows twitched, and he said angrily, I don't want to hear the word good fortune, and I don't want to resign myself to fate. I only want to hear 3 words, she can live. Hui Mo kneeled on the ground and said, Your Highness, I will do my best. If I can't save Lady Ning, I'll apologize with my life. Xiahou Qing breathed heavily and slowly closed his eyes. Get up, Hui Mo. It's me. I forgot myself. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Hui Mo's nose twitched. I know. He got up and took out the medicine and walked to Xiahou Qing. Your Highness, let me bandage the wound on your shoulder for you. You barely slept for a day and a night, and you need to rest. Don't fall down before Lady Ning recovers. How can a few shallow teeth marks be more poisonous than the plum blossom kiss? This time, I won't leave her half a step. If she wants to live, I'll live with her. If she wants to die, I'll go to hell with her. He held her gently in his hand as if he was holding the clouds in the sky. He didn't eat or drink, and he didn't leave her. In the next 3 days, Ning Shu had a high fever. She wandered in front of the gate of hell again and again. They tried their best to pull her back, but she slipped away again. Occasionally, she woke up with a start. Whenever she saw someone, it was as if she saw her enemy. She struggled desperately and wailed in pain. In that dark rainy night, her faith was completely destroyed. Since then, she didn't know anyone and didn't trust anyone, including Xiahou Qing. Chapter 488. Xiao Zhongping poked his head out of the door and watched Xiahou Qing seal Ning Shu's acupoints again to prevent her from resisting and harming herself, letting her fall into a deep sleep. In the past 3 days, every time he did this, he felt like he was peeling off a layer of his skin. In the past few days, the only time she was half awake was when she opened her mouth and said, "Kill me." Xiao Zhongping couldn't stand it anymore. She turned her head and whispered, "We can't go on like this. It's not a problem to seal her acupuncture points temporarily, but do we have to let her sleep like a puppet? What's the point of living like this?" She was Ning Shu, that intelligent Ning Shu, the Zhuge Liang among women. If she still had a trace of consciousness left, how painful would it be for her to watch him in this state that was neither human nor ghost? Hui Mo squatted beside the door and hit the wall with his fist. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! He didn't leave a mark on the wall, but his hand hurt. He scratched his head and said, "I'm still not good enough. I can't think of a way. I'm so useless. I can't save His Royal Highness. I can't save Lady Ning. Why did His Royal Highness pick me up?" Xiao Zhongping was really not good at comforting people. She racked her brain, but she couldn't think of any gentle and comforting words. She just said, "This is a heart disease. No matter how good the doctor is, he can't cure it. Instead of pulling out all your hair, why don't you dig out the people who hurt her and whip them to vent your anger?" Hui Mo was comforted by her special comforting skills. He silently pursed his lips and moved 2 steps away from her. Xiao Zhongping raised her eyebrows and said, "What kind of look is that? I'm comforting you, do you understand? It's rare for me to comfort someone, but you don't give me the honor. Be careful or I'll sentence you to death." Hui Mo hurriedly said, "How can I not give you the honor? I feel the princess's kindness. I'm deeply grateful. Thank you very much." While the two were bickering, a weak figure was leaning on the handrail at the bottom of the stairs, anxiously staggering up the stairs. Behind her, Shi Yang was earnestly advising her something, but she ignored him. "Zigui." Hui Mo went up to him. Zigui opened his empty mouth and anxiously cried out, "Ah!" Only after a long time did he realize that his thoughts could no longer be expressed through his tongue. "Are you looking for your young miss?" It was too difficult for Huemore to do so, but she will be stimulated whenever she sees someone. She even hurts herself. It won't help if you rush in to see her. Zigui helplessly stretched out her hands and gestured anxiously, but she realized that no one could understand her messy movements. She covered her mouth and cried silently. Shi Yang's eyes were red. "Good Zigui, don't cry. My heart is broken into pieces. Wait for me to get you a pen and paper. Write whatever you want to say, okay?" He turned around and wiped away his tears. He quickly took out a pen and paper and presented them to Zigui. Zigui took the pen and paper and wrote word by word with difficulty, "I want to explain to young miss personally. It's not like what that person said. Madam didn't abandon her. On the contrary, she tried her best to protect her. It's all my fault. I didn't protect young miss well. It's me, it's me." Patter, patter. The thick black ink mixed with her tears and dyed it into an ugly ball. Shi Yang took away the pen in her hand and didn't let her write any more. "What nonsense are you talking about? You didn't do anything wrong. If you want to say anything wrong, it should be that person. She harmed Shizzy, harmed Lady Ning, and also harmed you. I called myself a godly archer. Why didn't I shoot that person's head that night? In this round, they seemed to be the losers. No one was spared." Ning Shu's screams of terror rang out again. She had woken up again. Chapter 489. Because her acupoints and consciousness have been sealed again and again, her resistance is particularly fierce this time. She bites and punches desperately. Seeing that she can't break free, she begins to pull her wounds as if she wants to kill herself, which is better than dying in the hands of others. "Ning Shu! Lady Ning!" Everyone rushes in, but they don't know what to do. Hui Mo can't bear it, but he has to harden his heart and say, "Young master, how about sealing it again?" Before he finishes his words, he sees Xiahou Qing's black hair suddenly scatters. In Hui Mo's shocked eyes, he puts the white jade hairpin into Ning Shu's hand and aims at his chest. Xiaoshu, listen to me. I don't care if you know me or not, but I want you to remember that I will never hurt you like those people. If you don't believe me, just try it. Ning Shu, who is in a breakdown, is stunned for a moment. Then she grabs the jade hairpin and stabs it into Xiahou Qing's ribs without hesitation. Instantly, blood blooms. Hui Mo and others want to rush over to stop her, but Xiahou Qing raises his hand to stop them. Go on, there is even a slight arc at the corner of his mouth, whether once, twice, or countless times, I will never fight back, because Xiahou Qing will never hurt Ning Shu, never. But she doesn't understand his promise. She holds the blood-stained jade hairpin, pulls it out from under his ribs, and then stabs it deeply. Hui Mo's scalp is numb. He can't describe it with words. Crazy, crazy, these two people are crazy. 1, 2, 3, 4. The jade hairpin with the pattern of white crane wings is soaked in blood. It is thick, hot, and red. She trembles all over. The hazy, disordered, and terrifying world in front of her is suddenly burned with a hole. Slowly, slowly, his vague figure appears. Who is this person? He is wearing a beautiful moon-white dress and looks like an immortal. But his shoulders and chest are full of blood. Some are bitten, and some are just stabbed. There are so many wounds. He looks so miserable as her. Did she stab him? Why doesn't he hide? He just said, he will never hurt her. No, don't believe him. This person is just the incarnation of a devil. He wants to cheat her trust, and then after she gives her heart to him, he will step on her heart fiercely. Under the ninth heaven, everyone is the same. Her eyes are red with hatred. She raises the jade hairpin again and stabs at the man's heart. But just as the jade hairpin pierced through his clothes, cut through his skin, and was about to pierce through his beating heart, she suddenly shuddered, and then couldn't pierce any further. The jade hairpin fell to the ground and broke into 2 pieces. She held her head in pain and fainted. Xiahou Qing's expression changed drastically as he hugged her. Little Shu. Xiahou. Everyone suddenly panicked. Hui Mo rushed out and prepared to take the medicine bag. Suddenly, he saw a travel-worn figure rushing in from outside the inn. A large rock finally fell. He floated over like a gust of wind and carried the person up from the bottom of the building. Mr. Duan, you're finally here. Come and save me. Duan Changfeng's old bones almost fell apart as he straddled the horse's back. Then Hui Mo lifted him up and carried him on a cloud. His stomach was churning and he could only sigh that he was getting old and no longer had the elegant demeanor of the past. No rush, no rush. Let me take a look. When she was finally placed on the ground, the old man wiped his sweat and leaned over to take a look. His expression was extremely grave. How did this girl get injured to this extent? Knowing that the situation was serious, he didn't hesitate for a moment. His hands were like lightning and his eyes were like torches. He placed 2 rows of silver needles on his chest and helped Ning Shu to calm down. He wrote another prescription and asked Hui Mo to boil it quickly. Finally hearing Ning Shu's calm breathing, Xiahou Qing closed his eyes and exhaled a long breath. He stood up and solemnly bowed to Duan Changfeng. Thank you for taking the risk to inform me that Ning Shu was hiding in the convoy. Today, you came in time to save Ning Shu's life. Please accept my gratitude. Back then, at the foot of the White Wolf Mountain, Zhongxian had saved Zhongxian when he was severely injured. Back then, Zhongxian had merely tossed him a jar of wine and thanked him casually. But now, because of Ning Shu, he could put down his most precious pride as the Crown Prince of Nanping. Duan Changfeng couldn't help but sigh endlessly. He casually waved his hand, and his eyes, which had become increasingly cloudy after experiencing the wind and sand, fell on Ning Shu, who was fast asleep on the bed. It was long and misty, as if he was looking at another person he hadn't seen for many years and deeply missed. Even if Wu asks, I will definitely cure her. After all, I have a great relationship with her. Chapter 490. She's awake. Lady Ning is awake. Under everyone's nervous, expectant, and fearful eyes, Ning Shu slowly opened her eyes. This time, she didn't scream like before. After glancing around with fear, she grabbed the quilt and curled herself up, still resisting everyone. Until she saw Xiahou Qing, she suddenly ran down from the bed with bare ankles and hid behind him. Xiao Zhongping walked over and called, Ningxu? Ningxu? You need to change the medicine on your body. Let me change it for you, okay? Ningxu didn't respond at all. She hid behind Xiahou Qing again. Why does her behavior seem a bit childish? Where is the wisdom she used to have? Xiao Zhongping took a few steps closer and said to Xiahou Qing, what's the matter with her? Is she better or not? If she's not better, she's no longer screaming crazily. If she's better, she's still resisting outsiders. Oh, except for Xiahou Qing. She just said a few words to Xiahou Qing, but Ningxu suddenly ran out from behind him, pushed her away, and then held Xiahou Qing's arm tightly. Xiao Zhongping was pushed and staggered, and said angrily, what's wrong with you? Don't think that I won't care about you just because you're sick. Ningxu seemed to be angered by Xiao Zhongping's bad attitude. She angrily glared at her, and then hid behind Xiahou Qing again. Xiahou Qing couldn't see, so he naturally didn't know Ningxu's little trick. He only thought that she was scared again, so he frowned and protected her in his arms, and said with some dissatisfaction, Princess, she's sick. Was he blaming her? Xiao Zhongping was even more angry, and Hui Mo hurriedly pulled her to the side to persuade her. Duan Changfeng circled Ningxu for a whole circle, and a silk thread flew out to check her pulse, and said in surprise, this shouldn't be. The medicine I used shouldn't have this effect. Xiahou Qing frowned. Mr. Duan, what's wrong with her? Duan Changfeng thought for a moment and said, I don't know what went wrong. However, this girl probably only had the mind of a child. Because your highness didn't want to hurt her before, she only lowered her guard towards your highness. So, in order to ensure that she can continue to receive treatment with peace of mind, your highness will have to take care of her for a period of time. How old is the child? Even though Xiahou Qing had a strong mental fortitude, he couldn't help but reveal a stunned expression. Xiao Zhongping, who was as angry as a toad, was amused. Ha, Ningxu, to think that there would be a day when you would become stupid. What goes around comes around. All right, this princess is magnanimous and won't bicker with you. Come, hurry up and let this princess condescend to give you another dose of medicine. Once you've recovered, you won't have this blessing anymore. Xiao Zhongping was rarely so magnanimous, but she didn't expect that Ningxu didn't appreciate it at all. She angrily glared at her again, and even grabbed something to throw at her. Xiao Zhongping was once again angry like a quail. Xiahou Qing bent down, and unfamiliarly but gently comforted her. Xiao Shu, we won't apply the medicine first. You should be hungry. I ordered people to prepare your favorite food. Ningxu raised her bandaged arm in front of him. Hand, hurts. Xiao Zhongping rolled her eyes, sneered and muttered, oh, your hand hurts. Yesterday, when you stabbed Xiahou Shizi with the jade hairpin, you were so ruthless, how could your hand not hurt? If Xiahou Shizi falls for this kind of stupid trick, then the sun will rise from the west. Xiahou Qing understood, your hand hurts, so you can't hold the chopsticks, right? Huemo, ask the cook to come here. Ningxu became anxious and said loudly, you feed me, but I can't see. Ningxu stubbornly said, you feed me. Xiahou Qing had no choice but to bend the corner of his mouth indulgently. Xiao Shu, don't worry. Okay. Xiao Zhongping's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She angrily turned around and rushed out of the door. Although Baijia town was small, unexpectedly, the cook here made a good dish. Although it couldn't be compared with the chefs in the capital, it had a different taste. The meal was divided into 2 tables. Xiahou Qing and Ningxu sat alone at a table, and the others sat at another table. Xiao Zhongping poked at the rice while watching Xiahou Qing feed Ningxu the food bit by bit. She chewed the rice grains with her teeth, as if she couldn't wait to chew Ningxu into pieces like the rice grains in her mouth. How old was her mind? How could her hand hurt so much that she couldn't eat? Wasn't it Ningxu who chose her favorite food and put it in the bowl, and then stuffed it into Xiahou Qing's hand, waiting for him to feed her spoon by spoon? Superfluous. She was obviously scheming. What was she doing? What was she doing? She had already taken a bite of the cherry cake, but she still sent it to Xiahou Shiz's mouth. Her fingers touched Xiahou Shiz's lips, and she said something, "It's delicious. You should try it too." The most excessive thing was that Xiahou Shizi paused. His throat rolled slightly, and then he opened his mouth and ate it without any hesitation. It was as if the other people present didn't exist. Xiao Zhongping gritted her teeth and didn't taste the food. She put down the bowl and said, "I'm full." Huemore looked at her bowl and blinked. "Princess, you only ate a few mouthfuls." Xiao Zhongping, "I'm full of anger. I won't be hungry even if I don't eat for 3 days. Chapter 491. After a few days of not eating, Ning Shu's spirit was obviously much better. A thin layer of blood finally appeared on her cheeks, but her lips were still dim and almost transparent. No matter how he coaxed and persuaded, Ning Shu refused to let anyone get close to her other than Xiahou Qing. She was like a little tail that couldn't be shaken off. As long as he was 10 feet away from her, she would cry non-stop. Duan Changfeng couldn't figure out the reason at the moment, so he pulled Hui Mo to study the prescription together. After all, Ning Shu was weak. After a while, she hugged Xiahou Qing's arm and fell asleep. Hong Fei and the others immediately took the opportunity to bring a basin of water to change her medicine and wipe her skin. Xiahou Qing got up to avoid suspicion, but found that his hand was tightly held by her. As long as he moved slightly, Ning Shu showed signs of waking up. Xiahou Qing had to let her hold his hand and turned his face to the side. For the first time, Xiahou Shizi, who had always been indifferent and strategizing, showed an embarrassed expression. "You guys, continue. Just pretend that I don't exist." Hong Fei and the others also looked at each other awkwardly, but time was pressing and they didn't have time to think about it. They undressed her, wiped her clothes, applied medicine, and changed her clothes for fear that Ning Shu would wake up at any time. Separated by a thin layer of gauze, she was in the gauze and he was outside the gauze. One of his fingers was slender with distinct joints, and the other was slender and soft as if boneless, tightly intertwined with each other. In front of his eyes was still a sheet of darkness. He could not distinguish the colors of the world, the light and the shadows, but his ears could hear. He could hear the sound of her clothes being removed layer by layer through the veil that was like smoke. He could hear the sound of a cloth carefully wiping her body. He could hear the medicine bottle being opened and gently applied to her skin. After she felt a little pain, she softly moaned, like an oriole sobbing. At the same time, she gripped his hand even more tightly, as if she was asking for help. Previously, Ning Shu's life had been hanging by a thread and she had been on the brink of death. In his desperation, he had no time to care about the etiquette between men and women. He had only one thought in his mind: I can't let her die, I want her to live. But now, with the passage of time, the suppressed reverie was like a horse returning to the forest, unrestrained and unrestrained. Xiahou Qing's other hand on his knee clenched silently, and a layer of red color spread from the bottom to the top of his ear, but he forcibly suppressed it, so that no one noticed his loss of self-control. When the medicine was finally applied with great difficulty, Hong Fei and the others were all sweating profusely. They hurriedly took the cold water basins and left. After they left and the door closed, Xiahou Qing let out a long sigh of relief. He turned around and smiled bitterly. He leaned over her ear and listened to her even and obedient breathing. He whispered, "Xiao Shu, I won't go. Can you let go?" Ning Shu, who was sleeping, seemed to have heard him. She frowned and grunted in displeasure, as if expressing her strong resistance. What could Xiahou Qing do? Of course, there was nothing he could do. It was the first time in his life that he felt so helpless. Perhaps he owed her a lot in his previous life, so he was destined to repay her in this life. What could he do to her? He could only tolerate her, indulge her, love her, and pity her. He leaned over and stopped in front of her forehead for a short while, but stopped halfway. His voice was low and indulgent. "Well, since you don't want to let go, you can hold on. No matter when you want to hold on to these hands, and how long you want to hold on to them, it's up to you." Ning Shu was finally satisfied. She grabbed his hand and gently rubbed it against her cheek, and then fell asleep again. Previously, he had been in the same room with her because she had been in a state of chaos and had lost her mind. Now that she had woken up, although she only had the mind of a child, it was still inappropriate for them to be in the same bed without any taboo. So he called Ju Sai Hui and Mo Ji to get a screen in the middle of the bed, separating the two of them. Only a gap was left under the screen, allowing the two intertwined hands to pass through. The early summer wind was warm and intoxicating. The shadows of the trees swayed gently, and the moon was high in the sky. For many days, Xiahou Qing, who had stretched himself to the limit with only his willpower, could finally relax. In this warm wind, with her light breathing, he slowly fell asleep. The moonlight fell on his face. It was like jade and porcelain. It was so quiet that no one could bear to break it. Suddenly, something approached in the dark. 5 fingers clawed at his heart. He suddenly woke up and waved his sleeves like a dragon, fiercely pinching the other party's neck. Chapter 492. His hand was like a pair of pliers. As long as he exerted a little more strength, he could easily pinch her neck into 2 pieces. Until he heard a familiar sound. Xiao Shu. His heart skipped a beat. He immediately released his hand and regained his consciousness. Ning Shu covered her ravaged neck and subconsciously stepped back a few steps. But when she remembered that this person would never hurt her, she hesitated and stopped there. She was in a dilemma whether she should approach or retreat. Finally, she complained, "It hurts, it hurts." A drop of spring water fell into the ice pool and instantly melted the ice and snow. He said, "I'm sorry. I was very alert after I fell asleep. I hurt you. Xiao Shu, are you okay?" Hui Mo. He was about to call Hui Mo to treat her when she suddenly covered his mouth. Her hands hesitated for a moment. She held his hand and gently stopped it on her neck. "Blow it. It's okay." Under the moonlight, her clear eyes looked at him seriously. It seemed that as long as he coaxed her a little, she would reluctantly forgive his mistake. Such a soft and obedient voice was like a snow-white cat. It screamed in front of others but relied on him wholeheartedly. It rolled around and acted like a spoiled child. Feeling the soft skin in his palm, Xiahou Qing's palm, which was cooler than ordinary people, was hot. It was so hot that his palm was slightly sweaty. He didn't know if it was because the summer night breeze was too warm, or if it was because his heart was beating too fast, but a single spark ignited a prairie fire. He never knew that his willpower would be so weak that it would collapse after being lightly scratched by the cat's claws. Ning Shu grabbed his hand and rubbed it for a moment. He took back his hand and forcibly suppressed the impatience in his heart. He said, "It's so late. Xiao Shu, why are you still awake? Why are you looking for me?" Ning Shu's hand was rubbed well. Her hand was empty. She was a little dissatisfied and said, "I'm scared. I want to sleep with you." The flame that had been suppressed was suddenly poured with a bucket of oil. With a boom, it engulfed the entire wasteland. Xiahou Qing could not help but be absent-minded in that instant. His breathing became disordered, and he did not move for a long time. But this person who was adding fuel to the fire actually came to add fuel to the fire. Her 2 black mercury-like eyes stuck to his body under the bright moonlight. She curiously stretched out her finger and pointed at his jade-colored face and neck. Hey! Her face was red. Neck, red. Xiahou Qing bounced away as if he had been electrocuted and grabbed her naughty fingers. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. He kept reminding himself that she only had the mind of a few years old, so how could he take her words to heart? He repeated this sentence 10 times in his mind before he managed to find a trace of clarity. "You're a woman and I'm a man." Sleeping in the same room is already an exception. If we were to sleep in the same bed, it would be even more unreasonable. "Little Shu, be good. I'm right here, just a screen away from you. If you're scared, just call me. I won't dare to not answer. Is that okay?" "Not good. Scared. Not good. I'll sleep with you. I'll sleep with you." Ning Shu was anxious. She fiercely resisted. This kind of Ning Shu made Xiahou Qing feel a lingering fear. Little Shu, put your hand down, don't touch your wound. But she was like a spoiled child who had grasped his weakness. The more he was worried about something, the more she would do the opposite, even if the price was to hurt herself. Holding Ning Shu tightly in his arms, Xiahou Qing had a headache. In the end, he was helpless to indulge her. Having obtained Xiahou Qing's tacit approval, she finally revealed a satisfied and sly smile. She pressed him down and then lifted a corner of the quilt. She slowly wormed her way in like a cat, going from his waist to his chest. She then rested her little face on his chest. He. Chapter 493. Her blue silk-like hair slowly intertwined with his, covering half the bed. They were intimately entwined with each other. In his arms, her body was tightly pressed against his body. There were only 2 thin layers of silk between their bodies. Her moist breath gently brushed against his collarbone. Xiahou Qing's mind exploded. The 300 sutras were no match for her light laughter. He almost forgot himself as he pulled her off his body. Then, he used a thin layer of cloth to wrap her tightly and pressed her to his side. He slept with his clothes on and said in a low voice, "Sleep." Ning Shu was wrapped into a cocoon. She struggled for a long time and found that she couldn't get out. Finally, she gave up. She tried her best to move towards Xiahou Qing. Only when she was a little closer to him did she finally stop. Feeling her small face pressed against his arm, Xiahou Qing's breathing became normal. His palms silently clenched into a fist. Just now, there was a moment when he almost couldn't control himself. He almost used all of his strength to force himself to pull her away, and not. Xiahou Qing inwardly smiled bitterly. Xiao Shu, do you know that this is too torturous for me? In front of you, how can I be Madame Liu's disciple? For a moment, no one spoke. There were only 2 breaths, one heavy and one shallow. After a long time, he finally suppressed his thousands of thoughts. Xiahou Qing said in a low voice, "Why aren't you sleeping?" The summer wind seemed to be naturally dense with a thin layer of water vapor. In this ink-like sticky night, her eyes were bright and persistent. Beautiful. What's beautiful? Ning Shu didn't even think before blurting out, "You're beautiful." After saying this, as if to express the sincerity of her words, she solemnly added, "The most beautiful." Xiahou Qing's lips curved faintly. A moment later, the curve was flattened. He said, "Is it just beautiful? If you put me and your fiancé together, who would you choose?" Ning Shu blinked her eyes in confusion. She didn't understand what a fiancé was. Had she eaten it before? But that didn't stop her from giving the right answer. "I want you." He asked again, "Compared to your childhood sweetheart?" She said resolutely, "I want you." Her 2 unhesitant answers pleased him. He leaned over and gently stroked her soft hair. "Why? Is it only because I'm good-looking?" She seemed to understand this question a little. She thought for a while and then said seriously, "Good. It's best if you don't hurt me." Such a childish answer made Xiahou Qing chuckle. What kind of answer did he expect her to give now? This was already the best, wasn't it? Ning Shu didn't know the faint sadness in his heart. She closed her eyes and enjoyed his touch, like a kitten asking for a pet. But before she could enjoy it enough, the hand suddenly stopped. She anxiously pushed herself closer to his palm, as if urging him, "Why did you stop? Carry on, carry on." She heard the owner of the hand suddenly say, "What if one day I hurt you? Will all my good things become bad?" This question was too complicated, completely beyond her current thinking. She was completely stunned. She foolishly tilted her head and looked at him. She didn't know how to answer to make him happy. She could only randomly emphasize, "You're not bad, you're not bad." Xiahou Qing continued to softly say, "Xiaoshu, do you know that for a moment, I actually thought, if you can't recover your memories and continue to live like a simple child, it might not be a bad thing. Because I'm good to you, it's easy to believe a person. Is it easy to forget a person after waking up from a dream? This way, when I go to the Yellow Springs in the future, You can forget me as soon as possible and meet the next person who treats you well. You can live a happy life." Ning Shu was frightened by him like this. Her hands were entangled in the quilt and she anxiously bit his clothes with her mouth, indicating that he shouldn't say any more. She didn't understand, she was afraid. Feeling her helplessness, Xiahou Qing came back to his senses and softly coaxed, "Xiao Shu, don't be afraid. I was just joking with you. I won't leave you alone. Be good, it's late and you're tired. You can only recover if you sleep well. When you recover, I'll take you out to play, okay?" Ning Shu was very easy to coax. When she heard that he could take her out to play, her eyes lit up. She nodded vigorously and closed her eyes. She chose a comfortable position on his chest and obediently fell asleep. Perhaps she was really tired. Soon, he heard her even breathing. It was as if she really became a child. She was gently smacking her lips in her sleep. Xiahou Qing slowly laughed. He fumbled with her loosened quilt and gently stroked her head. "You're so easy to coax. In the future, when I'm not here, what will you do if you're deceived?" This night was no different from any other night to him. It was so quiet that he opened his eyes and looked at the night in front of him until the day came. Chapter 494. Shizi Yi, this is a secret letter from 2 days ago. Ju Sai presented a sealed letter to Xiahou Qing with a serious expression. Duke Ning is in trouble. Lady Ning's mother and Princess Xin have been sent to prison by imperial edict. They are waiting for His Majesty to deal with them. Duke Ning's 270 people have been detained. No one is allowed to take a step out. The crime is plotting rebellion. Xiahou Qing immediately frowned and his expression darkened. "When did this happen? Why are you only telling me now?" "It happened on the day Lady Ning woke up. The situation was too chaotic. Shizi Yi was so focused on saving Lady Ning that you didn't even care about yourself. I acted on my own initiative and didn't report this to you. Please punish me." Xiahou Qing couldn't bear to punish him. "I don't blame you. Immediately report the cause of this matter and the current situation." "Yes." This matter started from 7 days ago at the farewell banquet of Southern Yang. That day, Huemore and I accompanied Shizi Yi to the banquet. At the banquet, His Majesty suddenly became interested and proposed a marriage between Princess Royal Xiao Mingshue's only legitimate daughter and Princess Rui. Princess Royal refused several times and finally chose 6th Prince Xiao Yuni among the princes. At that time, Prince Ku and Princess Royal met in private. The scene of him strongly opposing the marriage was still vivid in his ears. Ju Sai continued. After Prince Ku left the banquet, he turned around and rushed to Shangji Mountain. He wanted to become a monk. After he left, the monks fished out a fish from the pond. In the belly of the fish, there was a book female lead Han Wang. Moreover, this news spread like wildfire throughout the capital. In just a short 4 hours, it caused an uproar and caused a storm in the city. Princess Royal hurriedly brought Princess Rui into the palace. They knelt in front of the palace and confessed to His Majesty to prove their innocence. After closing the palace door and talking for a long time, His Majesty calmed down and seemed to have been convinced. He ordered them not to worry and to return to their residence. Now that the matter had reached this point, it could be said that the wind had stopped and the rain had stopped. Everyone thought that they had temporarily passed the crisis. But no one would have thought that when the eldest princess and her family were on their way back to the palace, they would suddenly bump into an ox cart that had gone out of control. The bull's eyes were red and full of evil. It charged straight at the princess's carriage. Dozens of people couldn't stop it and crashed into the princess's carriage. When the imperial bodyguards killed the mad bull on the spot and straightened the carriage, they found that the young Canton princess had been stabbed in the chest and was no longer breathing. Xiahou Qing tapped his fingers lightly and said while thinking, "How many people were in the carriage at that time? Didn't you make any noise when it happened?" The prince consort had other matters to attend to, so he rode his horse first. At that time, the people sitting in the carriage were the eldest princess and the young princess, as well as a personal nanny. When the ox cart suddenly charged out, The people in the carriage were frightened and screamed. At the same time, the ox was also howling crazily, knocking down the stalls on the side of the road. The passers-by covered their heads and ran in all directions, colliding with the imperial bodyguards, making the scene even more chaotic. No one noticed when the nobles in the carriage stopped screaming. When the matter was settled, the imperial bodyguards opened the curtain and found that the eldest princess and nanny had fainted. The young Canton princess was dead. The case was so suspenseful that Xiahou Qing tapped his fingers even faster. What kind of weapon pierced through the young Canton princess's chest? Is there any evidence? The imperial physician did a careful examination of the wound and determined that it was a pair of scissors. But after the murderer finished the case, the weapon was quickly taken away. Since there was an ox cart, there must be a driver. Where is the driver? Dead. The officials followed the clues and immediately found out the identity of the driver. They led people to his house, and when they opened the door, they saw a floor full of corpses. The 5 people in that family all committed suicide. The bloody scissors were hidden in the cellar of his house. Xiahou Qing said, "Since the truth has been revealed, what is the connection between this case and young Canton Princess He Xin?" After the eldest princess woke up, she hugged young Canton Princess He Rui's corpse and cried non-stop. She knelt and begged His Majesty to investigate thoroughly. The matter has become so troublesome that it can't be cleaned up. His Majesty ordered the Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Gyeonggi Prefecture to investigate overnight and found 2 clues. First, the family was poor in the early years. The family almost starved to death. They had received long-term financial support from young Canton Princess He Xin. Second, the day before Prince Ku made a scene in Shangtaku Mountain and the case of the hidden books in the fish belly, young Canton Princess He Xin went to Shangtaku Mountain to release the animals to worship Buddha. Among the animals released, there were 12 carps. Chapter 495. A carp, a mad cow, a pair of scissors, and 6 corpses. The case was twisted and turned into a hair-raising circle that made one's blood run cold. Xiahou Qing's face showed that he was deep in thought. What is Princess He Xin's motive? Don't tell me no one doubts this. Everyone knew that Princess He Xin was weak and sickly. She spent most of her time recuperating in her manor. She didn't even attend the banquets of the noble families. For such a person who stood aloof from worldly affairs to suddenly be the mastermind of such a big case and offend the entire imperial family, it was simply inconceivable. Ju Sai paused and said, right after Princess He Xin was taken to the prison, a notice suddenly appeared on the bulletin board in front of the Meridian Gate. I don't know where it came from. There was a secret written on it. 20 years ago, Princess He Xin was Empress Ju's adopted daughter. This notice only existed for a short time before it was torn up by the officials. However, it had already spread among the common people. They all said that the recent cases were all done by Princess He Xin. Her purpose was to avenge Empress Ju's lingering spirit. Xiahou Qing's knuckles suddenly stopped tapping on the chopping board. His brows gradually formed a knot. A series of footsteps could be heard. Xiahou Qing's ears moved slightly. He immediately raised his hand to signal Ju Sai to stop. Sure enough, not long after, a blue figure pounced over and crashed into his arms. Her grievance and rebuke were in his ears. You're here. What are you talking about? Ignore me. Ju Sai tactfully retreated. Then he heard his usually cold and decisive Shizzy lower his voice and coax a child. Nothing. I was just talking about a small matter with Ju Sai. She was somewhat unhappy. No. You lied to me. I didn't lie to you. It really was a small matter. Facing her current state, how could he tell her the truth? Even if he did, with her current state of mind, it would be difficult for her to understand. Ning Shu was even more unhappy. She reached out and poked his forehead. You lied to me. Here, it's wrinkled. Xiahou Qing couldn't help but laugh. He gently held her fingertips. You're as sharp as ever. He recalled the footsteps just now, which were obviously different. By the way, why are you walking barefoot? He bent down and grabbed her ankle. Sure enough, his judgment was correct. Soon after, He revealed a displeased expression. Ning Shu immediately withdrew her ankle guiltily. Hong Fei and the others finally caught up with them, panting. Every one of them was dripping wet and in a sorry state. Lady Ning, please spare us. Quickly follow us back to take a bath. Don't torture us anymore. Otherwise, we will die young. Hong Fei couldn't help but shed bitter tears for herself. Didn't she just help her family's princess light a handful of sleeping incense that day? Why was this debt so hard to repay? Could this be retribution? Xiao Zhongping, with his wet hair, flew into a rage. Ning Shu, what do you want to do? This princess has lived for 15 years, and this is the first time I've bathed and changed someone's clothes. You actually don't appreciate it. Don't think that this princess won't dare to do anything to you just because you're sick. Xiahou Qing, who understood the reason, coldly said, Little Shu. Hearing Xiahou Qing's reprimanding voice, Ning Shu shrunk back with a guilty conscience. Then, she raised her head and complained, No, you are annoying. Xiao Zhongping glared, Then who do you want? Ning Shu's eyes swept over the three maids facing the princess. Finally, she turned and pointed, him. For a moment, everyone's faces were full of wonderful expressions. The maids' cheeks all turned red, and they avoided arousing suspicion. Xiao Zhangping's eyes almost popped out. You wish. Xiahou Shizi, quickly tell her that she's delusional. Xiahou Qing's ears were dyed red all the way to the base of his ears. He clenched his fists and coughed a few times. The princess has worked hard. Your Highness, please rest for a while. Red Rumored String understood and immediately winked at the people around her, pulling Xiao Zhongping away. Your Highness, this servant will serve you to rest first. By the way, your hair is wet, quickly let this servant comb it for you. There's no need to comb it, there's no need. Ning Shu, don't be delusional. After Xiao Zhongping was half dragged and half carried away, the others tactfully followed. Finally, only the two of them were left in front of the fan-shaped window lattice. Ahem. Xiahou Qing awkwardly coughed twice and finally said helplessly, Little Shu, next time, you can't say such a joke in front of others. What if people take it seriously? Ning Shu jumped up. No, it's a joke, I want you to wash it. You wash it. As she spoke, she ignored everything and directly took off her belt in front of him. Chapter 496. With a shou sound, the smooth belt floated to the ground. There was the sound of silk sliding across skin in the wind, like a butterfly's lips gently kissing a flower. Xiahou Qing immediately stood up and took off his outer robe to wrap it around her body. Ning Shu, you. He angrily wanted to ask, where is your brain? Do you know what you are doing? But when the words came to his mouth, he swallowed them back down. His impatience turned into a helpless sigh. He pressed down hard on her shoulder and said with a bitter smile, Ning Shu, are you punishing me? Do you know that this is the most severe punishment in the world for me? You have injuries on your body that haven't healed yet, so you can't bathe and change your clothes. You need someone to help you so that your wounds won't be soaked. But as a man, I can't bathe for you. He had thought highly of himself for many years. He thought that there were no more than 3 things in the world that could make it difficult for him. He never thought that the most difficult thing would be facing her at this moment. He took a deep breath and ignored the burning in his ears. He continued, My eyes are damaged, so I can't do anything. If you are really afraid, I can. I can cover the outside of the bath with a white veil. I can sit behind the white veil with you. That way, if you want to see me, you can just raise your head. How about it? Ning Shu unhappily pouted, but she could guess that this was his bottom line. If she continued to cause trouble, she might even lose this. So she snorted a few times and finally reluctantly agreed. After being released, Ning Shu put on her robe and walked barefoot to the bath. Xiahou Qing pulled her back and said with a headache, Xiao Shu, put on your clothes. Ning Shu looked back in confusion. She picked up the belt and tied it around her body. After tying it for a long time, she finally managed to tie it and continued to walk barefoot. Xiahou Qing had been in the court for 21 years and finally understood the meaning of helplessness. He sighed and picked her up by the waist. Tell me how many steps to walk in this direction. Leaning against his chest, Ning Shu was extremely beautiful. She smiled as she grabbed his collar and pressed her face against his chest. She was his eyes, and he was her feet. They walked down the stairs step by step, and under everyone's surprised and snickering gazes, they walked towards the direction of the bathhouse. A bathing pool and a chessboard, separated by a thin layer of gauze. Ning Shu overcame her great fear and allowed the maids to carefully scrub her. Her eyes stared unblinkingly at him behind the thin layer of gauze. Occasionally, she would call out his name and receive his response. It was as if he had drawn great courage and energy from this short Yen. I'm here. He sat cross-legged on the 19 lines of latitude and longitude, placing the black and white pieces one by one. He was as steady as Mount Tai, as if he was not disturbed by anything. Hong Fei could not help but sigh inwardly. As expected of the heir of Xiahou, he can still keep his heart as still as water in such a situation. Such determination is really admirable. After the bath, Hong Fei and others hurriedly took the opportunity to change the medicine for Ning Shu again in order to prevent further trouble. It was almost an hour when they finally finished everything. After packing Ning Shu, who exuded a faint medicinal fragrance after the bath, Hong Fei retreated. Sure enough, once she was free, Ning Shu immediately threw herself at Xiahou Qing, as if she had been greatly wronged by them. At the very least, this heir of Xiahou could clearly not see, but he could accurately stretch out his arm and catch her every time. After Hong Fei reported, she hurriedly left with the rest of the maids. She couldn't stand it, she couldn't stand it. She had served the masters in the palace for half of her life and had changed 3 masters. She thought that those masters were already difficult to deal with, but she didn't expect that this Lady Ning was the most terrible one. The most unbearable thing was not this. She had suffered hardships, sweets, and grievances. She had tasted enough of everything, but she had never tasted such suffocating PDA. She didn't hesitate to look and quickly escaped. Chapter 497. Taking Ning Shu into his arms, Xiahou Qing put down the chess piece in his hand and supported her unstable body. He said helplessly, "You are a girl. You can't throw yourself into a man's arms casually. Do you understand?" Especially after bathing and changing clothes, he was worried. If one day he was gone and her mind was still like this, what should he do? Hugging his neck, Ning Shu asked confusedly, "What is a man?" Xiahou Qing, the crown prince of Nanping, had read a lot of books since he was a child. It seemed that there was nothing that could baffle him. However, he hesitated on this question. He pondered for a moment and said, "A man is like me. There is also Huemor, Juicy, Shi Yang, the owner of this inn, the servant, and so on. They are all men." Ning Shu let go of his hand. Her eyes carefully lingered on herself and him. She used her hand to gesture, "Tall? There are also shorter ones." She had always been observant. Her finger gently tapped on the bulge in his throat. "This, you have. Ahem, there are also some men who are not obvious. You can't distinguish them so easily." Ning Shu looked around carefully, and her eyes finally fell on her chest. She suddenly realized what was going on and grabbed his hand and pressed it on her chest. "I know. You, here, are thin, I am fat." The feathers of the oriole gently swept over the plump pomegranate flower outside the window. Xiahou Qing almost lost his composure and pulled back his palm, pressing it hard on his knee. His jade-colored face flushed in panic. "Xiaoshu. You." Ning Shu tilted her head. She felt very strange. She couldn't understand why he was angry again. Could it be that men were the kind who liked to be angry? Getting angry with her was simply asking for trouble. Xiahou Qing covered his face and was silent for a moment. Finally, he sighed, "What you just said is not wrong. You just have to remember that men and women are not allowed to sit together when they are 7 years old. Some men are good in nature, but some are bad." The human heart was complex and unpredictable, and could not be distinguished by appearance. Moreover, One should not easily believe their honeyed words and righteous words. One must feel it with one's heart. Only when you have truly chosen a man that you believe in wholeheartedly can you be intimate with him and spend the rest of your life with him. Do you understand? Ning Shu nodded her head in confusion. He didn't know if she really understood or if she was faking it, but she turned around and threw herself into his arms again. After teaching for a long time without seeing any effect, Xiahou Qing had a headache and smiled bitterly. He rubbed her damp hair that had not been dried yet. What I said just now, you still. Forget it, forget it. I was too demanding. Ning Shu said in her heart, I understand, but I've already chosen the man I trust wholeheartedly, which is you. Why can't we be intimate with each other? Men were really hard to understand. Her gaze fell on the chessboard beside him and curiously asked, what is it? Teach me. When she was bathing, he had been playing chess and did not have time to pay attention to her. Humph. She wanted to see what was so fun about it. Xiahou Qing said, oh, this is Go. The chessboard is square, and there are 19 vertical and horizontal lines intersecting to form 361 intersections. The black and white pieces compete with each other. Ning Shu picked up a black piece and said, put it, where? Every piece lands on the intersections. The one with more empty spots wins. Ning Shu blinked and was puzzled. She pointed to 3 or 4 scattered pieces and said, not there. Put it on. Xiahou Qing was embarrassed for the second time today. He would not tell Ning Shu the reason why he only failed this time. Thus, he coughed twice and got up. You just finished bathing and your hair is not dry yet. The sun is bright outside so it dries faster. I'll take you out for a walk. We'll play tomorrow. Chapter 498. When Ning Shu heard that he wanted to take her out to play, she was a bit excited and a bit scared. She hesitated and said, go out? Xiao Shu, are you afraid that there will be too many people outside? Ning Shu lowered her head and forcefully dug into her fingers, her body slightly trembling. After not hearing her response for a while, Xiahou Qing understood her meaning. He pulled her into his embrace and slowly and firmly said, remember, with me here, I won't let what happened that night happen again. I won't let anyone hurt you at all. No one. There are many new and interesting things outside, as well as many delicious foods. I can buy you anything you want to eat. If you're really afraid of the people outside, we'll immediately come back. Xiao Shu, let's go out and try it out, okay? Ning Shu's tense body slowly relaxed under his comforting words. She gave a soft yen sound, as if she was no longer afraid. Ning Shu's cat-like chin rubbed against his shoulder and accidentally rubbed against the wound that she had stabbed him that day. That wound was originally layered. First it was bitten by her, and then it was stabbed by her jade hairpin. It had just formed a scab not long ago. When she was running around barefoot, he bent down to pick her up and it touched the wound. The wound seemed to have split open again. Xiahou Qing couldn't help but let out an "oh" sound, which was caught by Ning Shu. What's going on? She immediately stood up and reached out to pull at his clothes. I just told you not to throw yourself into a man's arms, but I didn't say you could take the initiative to take off a man's clothes. Xiahou Qing reached out to stop her, but she had already seen it. I want to, look. Ning Shu was very anxious and insisted on pulling open his collar. She first saw his collarbone and then a thick layer of gauze. The blood on the gauze was very dazzling. Ning Shu's eyes widened as she continued to pull open the gauze. She looked at the layers of ugly scars on his snow-white skin. How white his skin was how dazzling these scars were. Her eyes flickered. You're injured. Who is it? Hit him. Fragments of memories floated through her mind. There was the torrential rain that seemed to never stop and the dawn that seemed to never come. There were countless black shadows that pounced on her and her desperate struggle to break down. There was also the boundless fear and an embrace. Yes, an embrace. When she lost all her beliefs and rejected everything in the world, a person went against the current and hugged her, who was shivering in her shell, in his arms, and then a hazy layer of water immediately appeared. She remembered now. That person was her. The person who had hurt him like this was her. Boundless guilt made her tear up. Her shoulders trembled, and she was at a loss. Hit. The hand that she had just stretched out was grabbed by him. He lowered his head gently and stroked her chin, wiping away the moisture on her face bit by bit. He smiled faintly. You don't have to hit her. She didn't do it on purpose. She just suffered a heavy injury and was too upset. Thus, she unknowingly hurt me. So don't hit her. You have to forgive her and love her, okay? Ning Shu shook her head. She still couldn't get past herself. But, no buts. On the contrary, I have to thank her. If it wasn't for her, how could you put down your guard against me and trust me wholeheartedly? As soon as his voice fell, she suddenly stood on her tiptoes. Her soft and warm lips gently pressed against the mottled scars. Chapter 499. Xiahou Qing was shocked and held her down. You. Ning Shu raised her head. Your saliva. It's for treatment. I'll lick it for you. 2 days ago, when Mr. Duan's waist injury flared up, he accidentally pricked his hand. That was what he did, so he must be right. Her voice was so clean, without any distracting thoughts. It was as clear as a creek. She had the mind of a child, but her body had already grown up. She was like a pomegranate fruit that was quietly condensing on the top of the tree, waiting for it to ripen. Even her gentle breath on the side of his neck was deliberately tickling the feathers on the tip of his heart. Xiahou Qing's hand was so tight that blue veins appeared on the back of his hand. A little bit of sweat seeped out from his temples. He raised his hand and wanted to pull her away, but his hand was already in the air and he finally put it down. Because he couldn't bear to. The floating petals in the bathtub spun around, exuding a faint but seductive fragrance. Bright and warm rays of light leaped into the carved window patterns on all sides. The thin layer of gauze in the middle danced gently with the wind, sometimes light, sometimes heavy. Finally, they were all wrapped together in that layer of gauze. The two figures rose and fell, and finally stuck together. Through the crack of the door, several pairs of eyes quietly stared at them with relish. They were secretly delighted. Hong Fei covered her mouth and laughed. Ha ha ha. Shi Yang, hey, hey, hey. Hui Mo, wow, wow, wow. Tianwen, TSK, TSK, TSK. Zi Gui's eyes were faintly filled with tears. Ju Sai's face was stern and he ruthlessly took a bunch of people away. Hui Mo's neck was pinched and he said in pain, gently, let me see again. Recently, so many bad things have happened. It's rare to see Lady Ning and Shizzy being so sweet. You don't say. Although Lady Ning's mind has regressed, I didn't expect that she would escape even more. My Shizzy is happy, ha ha ha. Hui Mo was laughing so hard that his eyes couldn't be seen. He saw Xiao Zhongping, who had been silent, lowered his head and silently turned away. He hurriedly shut up, waved to Shi Yang and the others, and followed. Xiao Zhongping walked very fast and disappeared as soon as he turned around. Hui Mo looked around for a long time but couldn't find him. Finally, he heard a suppressed cry behind a weeping willow. He scratched his head and walked over quietly. Looking at her face full of tears again, Hui Mo looked up and down but couldn't find a handkerchief. Just like last time, he sighed and stretched out his sleeve. Your Highness, do you need my sleeve? Seeing his pitiful appearance, Xiao Zhongping held back his tears and said angrily, what are you doing here? Get lost, I don't want you to laugh at me. Hui Mo, huh? Your Highness, how can you accuse me wrongly? How am I here to laugh at you? I'm clearly here to. What are you doing here? Say it. Hui Mo smacked his lips and said, forget it. You can think whatever you want. As long as you're happy. I can't be happy as long as you're here. Get lost. Hui Mo was very good-tempered. He shrugged and turned to leave. But behind him, Xiao Zhongping anxiously said, come back. Princess, didn't you tell me to scram because you don't want to see me? Why are you going back on your words? Xiao Zhongping, I didn't call you because I want to see you. It's your sleeve. You said that you would give it to me, but I haven't used it yet. Give it to me. What are you waiting for? I order you to come back immediately. Hui Mo was amused. He walked back slowly and stretched out his hand to her. Xiao Zhongping held his hand and rubbed her tears and snot on his sleeve. Chapter 500. Hui Mo looked at her speechlessly and decisively turned his eyes to the sky. Xiao Zhongping, why don't you look at me? Are you secretly laughing at me in your heart? Do you think that I, a princess, live such a ridiculous life? Am I right? Hui Mo, Xiao Zhongping, you dare to not speak? That means you admit it. I thought you were the only good person among these people, but I didn't expect that you also think of me like this. You are going to piss me off. Hui Mo smiled bitterly and said, I don't speak because I think Princess's question is very ridiculous. In my heart, although Princess is sometimes reckless and sometimes can't control her temper, but in fact, you are a very kind and lovely person. How can you be related to the word ridiculous? The first half of his words almost made Xiao Zhongping angry, but the second half of his words magically smoothed her hair. She wiped her tears and said, Is what you said true? You are not coaxing me. Of course not. Hui Mo sat down on the stone bench next to her. Everyone in the imperial city wears a mask. They smile in front of people and stab people in the back. Only you live a real life. If you want to cry, you laugh. If you want to lose your temper, you lose your temper. Hey, I haven't finished yet. Your Highness, please don't do it. I want to say that the princess is the purest woman I have ever met, and also the one who makes my heart ache the most. Even if you really made some mistakes this time, you also have your own little selfishness. But Princess Hixin begged you in front of her, so you can't refuse. Moreover, after that, you tried your best to make up for it. As for my Shizzy, you love him openly. You tried hard and didn't regret it. Instead, you are brave and admirable. Therefore, I feel that your Highness is really very cute. Is he really cute? But why doesn't he have me in his heart? Even if I don't care about my reputation, he still can't like me. And he's so polite to me now, as if I'm a stranger. Although he doesn't say it out loud, I'm sure he hasn't forgiven me in his heart. I'm sure he still hates me for hiding Ning Shu and causing her to become like this. The more Xiao Zhongping spoke, the sadder he felt. He cried until he was out of breath. There are also others who are avoiding me like the plague. They don't even want to talk to me. They must be holding a grudge against me. Princess. Hui Mo couldn't help but comfort her back. Xiao Zhong couldn't help but choke with sobs, feeling wronged. Do you know? This time, I snuck out behind Imperial Father's back. When I go back, I will definitely be severely punished. Actually, I don't like the dark nights, especially when it's raining. Every time it's raining, I will hide in my bedroom alone and not go anywhere. Because my mother died in such a rainy night, I rushed out barefoot and knocked on the door of the Imperial Hospital. When I came back, her body was stiff. But I still couldn't help but rush over when I heard the news that you were chasing her all the way to the west. Also, I used to hate riding the most. Because I was kicked by fourth brother's horse when I was a child, so I never rode a horse again. But I knew that the carriage was small and couldn't hold so many people. In order to make room for Ning Shu, I took the initiative to get off the carriage and ride the horse. Although I, Xiao Zhongping, am not favored by Imperial Father, I am still a princess. I have never served anyone since I was a child. But in order to make up for the guilt in my heart, I took the initiative to wipe Ning Shu's body, change the medicine, and help her bathe and change clothes. I was splashed with water by her. I really know that I was wrong and tried to make up for it. Why can't they forgive me? Hui Mo looked at her deeply. Princess, no matter whether others can understand you or not, I have never hated you. When I found out that it was you who did it, I was indeed disappointed. However, when you chased after me on that rainy night in the carriage, I knew that I had not misjudged you. You will always be the sincere and kind little princess in my heart who clearly distinguishes between love and hate. Reflected in his eyes, Xiao Zhongping was lost for a moment. Really? Hui Mo didn't even think about it. Of course it's true. I swear on my most cherished treasure. If I lie, I will destroy it and I will die. I. Seeing his sincere expression and his pair of brown transparent eyes, Xiao Zhongping's heart unconsciously skipped a beat. Even her tears unconsciously stopped. But when she saw that he took out the set of knife that he loved as much as his life, she jumped up. Don't point such a terrible thing at me, scram. Princess. Hui Mo wanted to chase after her, but he was kicked to the side. He silently looked at his treasure. It seemed that he had messed up something. Sob sob sob. Chapter 501. Ning Shu's hands tightly gripped the corner of Xiahou Qing's clothes, hiding behind him as they slowly walked through the market. Every time a person approached, she would hide behind Xiahou Qing in fright, burying her face into his back, like a rabbit whose tail had been cut off. From then on, she was allergic to all humans with one head and two legs. Xiahou Qing firmly held her hand, not moving an inch away, giving her a sense of security. In that torrential rain that seemed to never stop, that person used a single night to completely destroy Ning Shu's faith in people. It was too much for her to accept again in one night. Now, it was already not easy for her to not scream and hurt herself. Everything else had to be done step by step. When a child holding a candy painting and jumping around accidentally bumped into Ning Shu, she hid again, her body trembling uncontrollably. She grabbed Xiahou Qing's clothes, as if she was using her whole body to resist, expressing that she wanted to go back, that she wanted to escape. Xiahou Qing stopped and gently pulled her in front of him. He said, "Xiao Shu, don't be afraid. They won't hurt you. Have you forgotten what I said to you? As long as I'm here, no one can touch a single finger of yours. Do you see that? The third shop on the left seems to be selling freshly made honey fruits. Everyone who has bought them is praising them. I can't see with my eyes. Can you help me take a look and see if those fruits are exquisitely made and if they taste sweet? Is that okay?" Ning Shu lowered her head, her heart incomparably tangled. After hesitating for a long time, she finally couldn't bear to disappoint him. The person in front of her treated her so well, how could she disappoint him? Moreover, he said that he would accompany her, always accompany her. In front of her, he said, "Come, hold my hand, let's walk over together." Ning Shu looked at the hand in front of her and finally gathered all the courage in her body to nod, completely placing her hand in his palm. The fruit stall was only 20 steps away from them. Ning Shu trembled with fear with every step, as if she was facing an abyss. When she finally finished the 20 steps, the last customer in front of the stall took the fruit and left. Xiahou Qing listened and said, "There's no one else, let's go." Ning Shu still resisted. There's still, boss." Xiahou Qing was very patient, chuckling, "Boss doesn't eat people, he only sells sweet fruits. Can you help me count how many different types there are?" Ning Shu's attention was somewhat diverted. She stood on her tiptoes and counted the fruits one by one. Every time she counted one, her craving increased a little. Because those fruits were indeed too well made. Each one was made into exquisite shapes, some were like different colored flowers, some were like colorful fruits. Even the colors were imitated accordingly, bright and attractive. The most wonderful thing was the row of rabbits, goldfish, and pig-shaped fruits beside the boss's hand. They were so lively and charmingly naive. One look and one could not help but smile. Ning Shu couldn't help but be entranced. She didn't even notice when the boss came closer. Until the boss happily said, "Miss, which kind do you want to try? You can choose." She was startled and immediately shrank back. The boss was still enthusiastically introducing, "My fruits are all fresh out of the steamer early in the morning, the fillings are all fresh flowers and fruits, each flavor is different. The summer air is stuffy, this old man specially put refreshing mint leaves inside, I guarantee that it won't be greasy at all, after eating it, you still want to eat it. Miss, you can choose whatever kind of fruit you like, if it's not delicious, it's free." She was still frightened, but the boss's appearance was very kind, and the pig-like fruit in his hand was very tempting. Finally, the desire for good food gradually overcame her fear. Little by little, she reached out her hand and gently pointed at the pig-like fruit. The boss neatly wrapped the pig-like fruit in a lotus leaf and handed it over. She hesitantly took it to her lips. Just as she took a bite, her eyes lit up, and she put the fruit to Xiahou Qing's lips. Delicious. Xiahou Qing took a bite along the place where she had just bitten, lightly licked his lips, and smiled after the aftertaste. It's really delicious. Ning Shu's eyes curved, and her smile was as sweet as the fruit. Her first try didn't hurt her, so she slowly let her guard down. She immediately turned back to choose a lot of other flavors. This, that, and that. Okay. Then Xiahou Qing used similar methods to let her adapt and relax again and again. Although she still didn't dare to take the initiative to get close to people, she gradually didn't feel so repulsed. After playing the role of the old man of the fruit stall, Tianwen immediately turned into the sugar painting stall owner. He took off his fake beard, sweating profusely from the heat, and complained dizzily, "Oh, hey, King Ju of Shong teased the feudal lords for Bo Bao Sai's sake. I know what's going on now, it's too tiring, when will this end?" Beside him, Ju Sai, who was playing the trick stall owner, said lightly, "That's King Yu of Ju, idiot." Chapter 502. In this market, half of the people were guards of the Nanping mansion. They accompanied Ning Shu for 3 days in a row. Ning Shu hid behind Xiahou Qing and could walk side by side with him. Occasionally, when she saw something interesting, she would take the initiative to take a look. However, she still held his hand, as if that hand was the source of all her courage. With him, she would not be afraid of the world. On the 4th day, the originally quiet town suddenly seemed to come alive. The streets were crowded with people. It seemed that everyone in the town had come out. It seemed that today's play could not go on, and there was no need to continue. Hey! This town is not big and there are not many people. Why is the street so lively today? But what festival is it? That's not right. The Dragon Boat Festival has passed, and the Qixi Festival has not arrived yet. Now it's June, the busy time for farmers. They shouldn't be so idle. Shi Yang took off his fake beard and asked a person, "Sir, are you holding a celebration today?" The old man's ears were sharp and his eyes were sharp. He had already heard that a group of nobles had come to the town a few days ago. Seeing the young man's appearance, he could guess who it was. Therefore, he said, "Noble sir, you may not know, but today is our Baijia town's unique festival, called the Mysterious Maiden Festival. For the people of our Baijia town, this is a festival more important than the New Year. How can it not be lively? What's the origin of this mystery fairy festival?" The old man said, "Honorable guest, please look over there. That mountain is called the Mystery Fairy Peak. Since the day our Baijia town was recorded, this mountain has been there. It has protected the peace of our Baijia town for generations. Legend has it that it is the incarnation of the mystery fairy of the 9th heaven. She was wronged and punished to the human world, and turned into a mountain. Because of the kindness of a god, she will spontaneously protect the people here every day when she wakes up. But every day after she falls asleep, the strong resentment caused by the injustice rages and condenses together, erupting at a fixed time every year. Therefore, every year on this day, the people here, regardless of whether they are men or women, old or young, have to stop their work and gather together to hold a festival. They sincerely kowtow to the mystery fairy and offer sacrifices to dispel the terrible resentment, praying for the fairy's protection. No one dares to be negligent. Otherwise, they will suffer the wrath of Goddess Xian Naiyu. So miraculous. What will happen to those who don't participate? Will they suddenly contract a chronic disease or will their family's wealth be ruined?" The old man glanced at him and said, "You don't believe me, do you? In the past, many people who passed by our town didn't believe me and were punished in the end. Take last year as an example. Those 3 fur merchants passed by our town for a temporary rest. We kindly persuaded them to come out and pay their respects together, but they became suspicious instead. Thus, The first one was strolling on the mountain when he suddenly saw the shadow of a woman in red floating past. He turned around and accidentally stepped on a stone, slipped, and rolled down the mountain to his death. His brain juice was even smashed out. The second person seemed to be waiting for someone on the Jade Belt Bridge. After waiting for a long time, he was annoyed and wanted to walk by the river. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the water and dragged him into the river to drown him. The corpse was fished out, and there were 5 deep scratches on its feet. The third one was even more terrifying. He was sleeping soundly in an inn when a fire suddenly broke out in the middle of the day and burned him to death. In the sky full of fire, many people saw a red shadow floating around and could faintly hear the laughter in their ears. That scene was so terrible. So, distinguished guests, don't blame me for not reminding you. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Otherwise, there won't be anyone to collect your corpse. The story gave Shi Yang goosebumps in the summer. He cupped his hands to express his gratitude and hurried back to his young master to repeat this strange story. Young master, although Confucius doesn't talk about strange things, it's better to believe in some things than not. Anyway, let's just go with the crowd and pay our respects. Shall we go? Chapter 503. After listening to Shi Yang's mysterious explanation, Xiahou Qing gently twisted the finger bone in his hand a few times and smiled lightly. He put the finger bone into his sleeve pocket and reached out to take a few slender bamboo leaves from Ju Sai. His slender fingers nimbly folded and flipped them. Soon, a nimble bamboo grasshopper appeared in his palm. This was the little toy that Ning Shu loved the most at the market yesterday. After returning to the inn, she played with it for a long time. It didn't even stick to him as much until the little grasshopper fell apart. Ning Shu was very disappointed until Xiahou Qing softly coaxed her that he would buy an identical grasshopper for her tomorrow. After he finished making the grasshopper, he continued to make the next bamboo rooster. He said, according to the old man, since everyone went to participate in the ceremony and only 3 people didn't go, how did they know that the first person saw a red shadow and wasn't attacked by the beasts in the mountain? The second person was dragged into the water by the water ghost on the bridge and didn't accidentally fall into the river and get entangled by the lush water plants and drown. The third person was burned to death in his sleep and wasn't locked in the inn and murdered. Shi Yang was slightly stunned. Does Shizzy mean that there is a problem? Xiahou Qing's tone was indifferent. There is this possibility, but it can't be ruled out that it is indeed a subtle coincidence. A person's imagination was limitless, especially when it came to matters related to their beliefs. They would subtly fabricate countless mysterious details, thus creating an unfathomable atmosphere and adding even more mysterious colors, causing people to fear, revere, and worship them. No matter which possibility it is, this Xian Nu peak is indeed a little interesting. Xiao Shu. He waved his hand and called Ning Shu, who was catching butterflies in the hydrangeas, over. He reached out his hand. Ning Shu saw the little toy in his palm and her eyes immediately lit up. She ran over and held his hand. She tiptoed and planted a kiss on Xiahou Qing's lips. Ever since she had kissed his scar that day, she had never gotten tired of this little action. Especially after she had suddenly attacked him, his handsome and otherworldly face had suddenly returned to the mortal world, and the tips of his ears had quietly been dyed with a touch of red, just like now. On the side, Shi Yang and the others immediately coughed and looked up at the sky as if to say, "You continue, you continue. We were blind just now and didn't see anything." Xiahou Qing completely ignored their teasing. He knocked her head in exasperation and enjoyment and said, "Little Shu, do you want to go out and play? There is no market today, but there is a special ceremony. Everyone in the town will participate. So it will be very lively and there will be many things that you have never seen before. But there will also be a lot of people. But Xiao Shu, remember that I will always be by your side and will never let anyone hurt you. Xiao Shu, you decide whether you want to go or not." Ning Shu was tangled and bit her lips. Her eyebrows were full of struggle. Over the past few days, she had been slowly led out by Xiahou Qing. She had seen many strangers. These people were either warm and courteous to her or indifferently brushed past her. In short, no one showed any hostility to her, nor did they harm her in the slightest. But the fear of the unknown was too deep in her bones on that rainy night. How could it be erased in a day and night? She struggled for a long time and still wanted to shake her head. Then she felt him silently reach over and hold her hand. Yes, she was still very afraid, very afraid. But she had this person. This person's name was Xiao Qing. She did not have many memories of him in her mind, but she was very certain that this person would always be in front of her to protect her. So she took a deep breath and restrained the trembling of her body. Then she forcefully nodded her head. I want to go, I want to go. Xiao Qing's heart trembled. He could not help but impulsively embrace the girl in front of him. His eyes were slightly wet. My Xiao Shu is so good. You are the best woman in the world. Chapter 504. Ning Shu lowered her head and rubbed against his chest. She didn't know how to express it. She just did it instinctively. Although he didn't force her, she clearly felt what he wanted. He wanted her to get rid of the nightmare of that rainy night. He wanted her to stop locking herself in a small cage and not dare to face anyone. He wanted her to be brave, he wanted her to be strong, he wanted her to accept the world again. She felt it, so no matter what he wanted her to do, she would try her best. Even if she was afraid, even if she hesitated, as long as it made him happy. The world didn't matter to her at all. Only he mattered. The group of people got ready and followed the crowd to the Xian Naiyu peak. It had to be said that the people of Baijia town were devout to the gods they believed in. Along the way, even a 4- or 5-year-old child held a lotus lantern in his hand and carefully followed the adults to the Xian Naiyu temple, preparing to present it to the Xian Naiyu empress later. Ning Shu looked at it curiously, so Xiao Qing waved his hand and ordered Juicy to buy one for each person. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. With this lotus lantern, Ning Shu's attention was diverted by more than half. Even the tension of being surrounded by the crowd was reduced a lot. Holding the small lotus lantern with both hands, her snow-white face was illuminated by the bright sun above her head. Many men couldn't help but look at her when they passed by. Xiao Qing frowned and ordered Hui Mo to present the veil hat and personally cover her. With her vision blocked, Ning Shu felt a little uncomfortable and said, "It's uncomfortable. Take it off." Xiao Qing rarely said domineeringly, "Good girl, you must wear it well." She raised her head in confusion and looked around through the gauze curtain. She saw that many women around deliberately slowed down their pace and looked shyly and timidly at Xiao Qing. Suddenly, she understood. She put the lotus lantern in Xiao Qing's hand, turned around and asked Hui Mo for a veil hat. She stood on tiptoe and tried to put it on Xiao Qing's head. "You too, wear it well. Don't let others see." Xiao Qing chuckled and bent down cooperatively. "Okay, whatever Xiaoshu says, I'll listen to you." Xiao Zhongping was disgusted when he saw the two of them eating vinegar from each other. He rolled his eyes and sped up his pace angrily. Shi Yang kicked him lightly, and Huemore hurriedly chased after her. "Princess, princess, I specially chose this lotus lantern. It looks better than the one in your hand. Why don't we exchange it? What kind of look is that? The indigo lamp in my hand is clearly more solemn and dignified, more suitable for worshipping. Your color isn't bright, your elements aren't plain, you're half-baked, so ugly. Ah, so it's like that. Since your highness doesn't like it, I'll take it further away. Come back. Who told you to take it? Give it to me." Although this princess doesn't like it, this princess will reluctantly accept your kind intentions. Remember, I'm only doing this because I pity you. You're not allowed to think too much, understand? Understood, understood, understood. Hee. What do you mean by hee? I said, I'm only doing this because I'm reluctant. No, it's not because of you. I really understand. Hey, the group of people talked and laughed. Only Zi Gui, who was at the back, silently looked at the lotus lantern in her hand without saying a word. Since the rainy night that destroyed countless people, she forever lost the ability to speak. She could only silently look at all the excitement around her. It seemed that other than the last thought of protecting her miss, she had already left the world of mortals. Yang casually ran back from the front, holding a water bag in his hand. "It's such a hot day, drink some water." Before Mr. Duan left, I specially asked him to make me a cold drink to relieve the heat. "Come and drink some. How are you? Are you tired? If you can't walk, don't be embarrassed. Come and find me immediately. I'll carry you." Zigui raised her head and looked at him repulsively. There seemed to be thousands of words in her eyes, expressing, "Go away, I don't need you to pity me." Yang's enthusiasm was wasted, and he sighed. "How many times have I said, I'm not pitying you? You're so fierce. Even if you can't speak, your eyes can kill me. Why should I pity you? So the one who should be pitiful is not you, but me. In this life, I was extremely afraid of women and swore to never get married. But the heavens wanted to torment me and let me meet you. The first time I saw you, I knew I was done for. Every night, when I closed my eyes, I was dreaming of marrying a tigress like you as my wife. I was so anxious that I got angry. But you just don't like me. Even now, you still don't like me. Tell me, am I not the most pitiful one?" Zigui's eyelashes trembled. She turned her face and coldly ignored him. Yang was not discouraged. He continued to shamelessly say, "I know you've been brooding about your tongue these days. You feel that you're half useless. But what's wrong with that? I said that I'm a talkative person. In the future, I'll be your mouth. If you don't agree, you have to say it quickly. If you don't say it, I'll take it that you agree. Hey, don't hit me. You're still that tigress from before, so fierce. I'm telling you, it's useless even if you hit me. My biggest advantage is that I'm thick-skinned. Whether you accept it or not, there's no discussion. It's settled." Zigui's delicate face was stunned for a moment as she looked at the laughing and escaping figure that was as bright as the sun. Her eyes became wet, causing the figure to become dazed, but it was even more dazzling. It was deeply imprinted into her heart. She turned her head and quickly blinked away the wetness in her eyes. Her face bloomed with the first expression of a living person in these days. She chuckled. She pulled out the soft whip from her waist and chased after Yang fiercely. She whipped him fiercely. Chapter 505. After walking for about an hour, Xiaoqing and his companions mixed in the crowd and gathered in front of the Xiannayu temple at the foot of the mountain. There was a clear pool of water in the temple, which had a radius of 100 steps. In the clear pool, there was a 3-foot stone statue of Xiannayu. The stone statue's face was beautiful and gentle, merciful and compassionate. People could not help but submit to it at first sight. There were tens of thousands of believers in the temple, and the crowd was so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The one who presided over the ceremony was a respectable elder, who was also the mayor of the town. He wore a red mask with fangs and stood in front of the altar. The bell in his hand rang, and he jumped in front of the statue of Xiannayu while murmuring something. The believers knelt down and held the lanterns above their heads. They looked at the old man who was performing the ceremony on the altar with fanatical eyes. When the old man finished performing the ceremony, he closed his eyes and waved his hand. The people stood up and rushed to put the lanterns in their hands into the clear pool. Then, they each raised a small knife and scissors and slashed their arms heavily, forcing the surging hot blood from their wounds into the blue waves. In the blink of an eye, the clear pool water was dyed bright red, and even the merciful goddess statue in the middle of the pool seemed to be tainted with a trace of evil. Hui Mo and the others, who originally wanted to join in the fun, were shocked. Only now did they realize that their real sacrifice was not the colorful lanterns, but their own blood. According to what he heard, Xiaoqing immediately covered Ning Shu's eyes. He was afraid that the incredible bloody scene in front of her would stimulate her again. Hui Mo had goosebumps all over his body, Oh my God, are the people here sick? It's the first time I've seen such a way to worship the gods. Those people's faces are pale with blood, but they are still squeezing their blood vessels. They are sick. Your Highness, let's not watch this show. Let's hurry down the mountain. I have a bad premonition that the people here are panicking. The scene in front of him could no longer be described as pious. These people were not afraid of death or pain. It was as if they did not care about the lives of their gods. It was as if they had lost their minds. Not only that, some parents didn't care about their children's cries and struggles. They forcefully cut their children's arms and injected the fresh and fragile life force into the pool to express their most sincere worship to goddess Xian Naiyu. Seeing this scene, Hui Mo immediately stopped in his tracks. Everyone present, including Ju Sai, also lost their usual calmness and was burning with anger. Shi Yang immediately cursed, "My God, what are they doing? That was their child. Fuck. You're sick, sick, sick." Hui Mo was shocked. He remembered that 10 years ago, his parents had cut off their own flesh for him to eat. However, these people in front of him were so cold-blooded and heartless. They didn't even care about the life of their own child. The corners of his eyes turned red as he clenched his fists and rushed forward. Ju Sai immediately stopped him. There are nearly 1,000 of them gathered here. The disparity between the enemy and us is too great. If we rush in rashly, we may be controlled by them. Moreover, they won't be able to appreciate our good intentions. For the first time, Hui Mo showed such an irritable look. Then are we just going to watch those innocent children suffer from these twisted torments? Even if they are lucky enough to survive, they will be confused by the same ideas in the future and become another wave of the same lunatics. Will they continue to harm their next generation? No, even if they gang up to kill me, I will stop them. Chapter 506. Just as Hui Mo was about to rush over to stop these crazy believers, the other side took the initiative. The mayor suddenly opened his eyes and said to them in a solemn voice, "Foreigners, why don't you kneel?" In an instant, hundreds and thousands of pairs of eyes gathered on them. Every pair of eyes was eerie, as if they were paper dolls for the dead. Ha! Shi Yang laughed. He carried his precious quiver on his back and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He said carelessly, "My master has a noble status. He has always knelt before the heavens and the earth. If you want my master to kneel, I'm afraid your gods can't afford it." Some fanatics in the crowd immediately roared, "How dare you blaspheme our gods? How dare you? They are foreigners again. As long as they come, our town's ceremony will be ruined. Tie them up. Tie them up. Tie them up." The mayor spread his arms and temporarily suppressed the anger of the people. He said, "Since you have come to our Baijia town, you should abide by our rules. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. We will tie you up and send you to the goddess to atone for your sins. If you are injured, disabled, or dead, don't blame us." As the princess of Great Yu, she had never been threatened so shamelessly. Xiao Zhongping raised her eyebrows and said, "You are so arrogant. Do you know who I am?" "I am." Hui Mo was worried that her identity would be exposed, so he pulled her behind him and said with a smile, "This land belongs to the king. Listening to your tone, why do I feel that you don't care about the law at all? It's like you recognize the statue as the king. It's really fresh. If you want to catch us, come and try. Let's see if I am afraid of you." Juicy ordered. Everyone lined up to protect Xiahou Qing and the others behind them. The townspeople stood aside spontaneously. Seeing that a dispute was inevitable, suddenly the crowd burst out, "Oh my God, it's bleeding again. It's over, it's over. People are going to die again." Everyone looked at the statue of the goddess in the middle of the pool. They saw that in the eyes of the goddess who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind, 2 lines of blood flowed out without warning in broad daylight. The divinity of the statue was completely wiped out and turned into evil. Seeing such a suspenseful scene, Huemo and the others couldn't help but feel surprised. Even Ning Shu, whose eyes were covered by Xiahou Qing, curiously opened Xiahou Qing's hand and looked at the strange statue without blinking. The citizens, who were filled with righteous indignation, all knelt down in fear. Even the mayor stopped the ceremony, took off his mask, and worriedly said to the citizens, "Everyone, let's go down the mountain and look around to see if anything happened." The people looked pale. They had no time to care about the wounds on their arms. They lowered their heads and sighed. Chapter 507. Xiahou Qing smiled and said, "My little Shu is really the bravest. Okay, I'll carry you up." She was his eyes, and he was her wings. Xiahou Qing wrapped an arm around her waist, and with the tip of his foot on the ground, he carried her and spun up, landing lightly on the large hand that the deity statue had extended. Xiahou Qing said in a deep voice, "Little Shu, do you see anything wrong?" Ning Shu touched the bleeding eyes of the statue with her fingers and sniffed it. She frowned and said, "It smells fishy." The townspeople went to search together, but before Ning Shu could figure out where the unusual smell of blood came from, someone at the foot of the mountain let out a shrill scream and quickly shouted, "Arth, husband! How can you leave us like this? How can we live like this? Come and see. People are dead. People are dead." 3 more. "Oh my God. Her Majesty Shen Naiyu is angry. Our Baijia town is finished." Hearing the noise, Xiahou Qing listened carefully. He landed on the ground with Ning Shu in his arms and immediately rushed over. Ju Sai and others did not hesitate to follow. When she saw the 3 corpses surrounded by the crowd, Xiao Zhangping's face turned pale. She turned around and vomited. Hui Mo hurriedly patted her back. Xiao Zhongping was trembling all over. She said in horror, "What are those things? Are they really human?" It was not her fault that she was so delicate. The 3 corpses had died so miserably that none of them had a whole body. The first one seemed to have been bitten by a ferocious beast. Half of the flesh on his body was gone, leaving only a skeleton with shreds of flesh hanging from it. The second one had just been fished out of the water. His skin was blue and his eyeballs were bulging out. His neck and legs were full of handprints, as if he had been dragged into the water and drowned by a ghost. The third one was even worse. His limbs had all been chopped off, and he was covered in blood. He looked like a human swine, and his entire body was emitting a nauseating stench. His mouth had been sewn up with needles, and there were bloody holes one after another. Some brave townspeople approached and pried open his mouth, only to find that it was filled with night incense. In the blink of an eye, he turned around and vomited again. Before the relatives of the corpses could even get close, they had already fainted from crying. Even Ju Sai, who had always been calm, was somewhat pale. He was forcefully holding back his vomit. Shi Yang and the others had long vomited. Even Hui Mo, who was used to big scenes, couldn't stand it anymore. He held his breath and said, "Oh my God. Why did she use such a humiliating method to kill people? This goddess Shen Naiyu is too much of a character." Only the 2 of them were as calm as ever. One of them was Xiahou Qing. He had already lost his sight and smell, so he was naturally unaffected. The second was Ning Shu. She had thought that she would be afraid and bring up bad memories, but she did not expect to see this scene without a trace of fear. Instead, she was like a fish in water, curiously approaching and looking around, as if it was her instinct. Zigui hurriedly took out a handkerchief and handed it over, so that his young miss would not be offended by those filthy things. After the townspeople vomited all the things in their stomachs, they finally felt uneasy and were filled with righteous indignation. Mysterious Fairy used to only harm foreigners when she was angry. But now she has extended her hand to the townspeople of Baijia Town, which means that Mysterious Fairy's resentment can no longer be suppressed. What should we do? Should we run away? We have lived here for generations. Our clan's land is all here. Where can we run to? Moreover, Mysterious Fairy is so powerful. As long as she wants to kill people, even if we run to the ends of the earth, it will be useless. Have you forgotten Bai Laosan and his family? Then are we going to wait for death here? I haven't lived long enough. I don't want to die. It must be that these foreigners were disrespectful to Mysterious Fairy, so Mysterious Fairy's resentment was completely aroused and she sent down the divine punishment. As long as we catch them and take them to Mysterious Fairy as a blood sacrifice, her anger will definitely be extinguished. Catch them, catch them. Will our entire family be executed? Hurry up and get out of the way. There might be people in the world who did not know the emperor's name, but there was no one who did not know who Xiahou Qing was. It was not only because of his short but dazzling experience in the past 21 years, nor was it because of his peerless talent and appearance, nor was it because of the enormous Nanping mansion and 500,000 steel cavalry behind him. Those were too far away from the common people. What the common people remembered the most in his past experience was that when the enemy country invaded, they kidnapped 30,000 wounded soldiers, women, and children at the border. After enslaving and ravaging them, they were all killed. The whole country was shocked. Xiahou Qing, the crown prince of Nanping, fought for his father and won a great victory at the foot of White Wolf Mountain. He also chopped off the heads of the 30,000 surrendered soldiers and became famous in the 9 provinces. Some people were born to be looked up to. Xiahou Qing was not only looked up to, but also revered. Xiahou Qing walked over and protected Ning Shu behind him. He said calmly, "Little Shu, if you have anything to say, just say it. With me here, I'll see who dares to stop you today." Chapter 509. Ning Shu raises her head and looks at the back of the man in front of her seriously. His skin is pale all year round. He is tall and thin. A jade belt is wrapped around his waist. It is not much thicker than her. She can't see, her tongue can't taste, and her nose can't smell. He looks like a patient who will collapse at any time. However, he is like an indestructible wall that blocks all the wind and rain in the world for her. It seems that there is no need to be afraid anymore. There is nothing to be afraid of. In front of her eyes, thousands of fragments are pieced together. The collapsed part of her heart is finally fully awakened at this moment. Slowly, slowly, it returns to its original position. Ning Shu closes her eyes and opens them again. There is a glimmer of light in her eyes. Her voice is low but firm. The shape, is wrong. It shouldn't be like this. Xiahou Qing's heart moves. He calls, Hui Mo takes the medicine bottle and puts on the gloves. He turns his head and takes a deep breath. Then, he holds it. Enduring the ecstasy of the night fragrance exuding from the corpses, he goes over to check the corpses. After a closer look, he really finds something wrong. Lady Ning is right. There is indeed something wrong with these corpses. The first person who was bitten to death by a beast, his skin and flesh are split open and stiff. If he was bitten to death when he was alive, the wound would not appear like this. Instead, it would shrink. The same is true for the third one. As for the second one who drowned, if he really drowned, he must open his mouth and scream desperately when he was struggling to breathe in some sand. But this corpse only has a little sand near his mouth and nose. After opening his throat, there is no sand in his throat. He must have been murdered and thrown into the river. Hui Mo scratches his head, because the death is too ugly and the smell is too, ecstasy. I didn't look carefully just now. The one who asks is a pawn shop owner in town. You mean that the 3 of them were murdered and deliberately made like this? Why would the murderer do that? Hui Mo had helped Ning Shu with 3 cases in a row, so he had learned something. Xiao Zhongping was watching from the side, so he deliberately wanted to show off his skills. There are only a few reasons. First, to destroy the corpse, reduce the clues, and hide the identity of the murderer. Second, to create panic and deliberately choose a special day like the Mystery Maiden Day to frame others, and the unlucky people who were framed are us. Third, to rule out the possibility that there is a deep hatred. Killing people is not enough, so he deliberately tortured the corpse to vent his anger. The more terrible the corpse is, the more satisfied the murderer will be. Isn't that right, Lady Ning? He looked like a big peacock with its tail open. He blushed and raised his head, deliberately showing off his most beautiful feathers. Looking at his bravado, Ning-Shu couldn't help but laugh. She lowered her head and thought for a moment, then said, "There is another possibility." "What is it?" "These three people are the most honest and taciturn people in the town. Usually, when they talk to a girl, their faces will turn red. Except for the crippled eighth brother who married a wife, the other two can't even get married. How can they make enemies? Let alone such a murderer who kills without blinking an eye." The lame eighth brother's wife cried until she was out of breath. "My husband was really a good man. I was born half disabled and couldn't have children. He never complained or held a grudge against me. He treated me as if I was his own flesh and blood. Why did I die so miserably? Oh God, please take me away too." "That's right. Our Baijia town has been here for generations. We've watched each other grow up. Who doesn't know each other? They're all good people. Every time I go to the butcher's to buy meat, he always gives me 2 extra coins. When my handkerchief fell into the river, it was Lai Sai who helped me get it out." "That's right. If it is really murder, why did 3 people die last year? The year before last? Could it be?" From the discussion of the townspeople, Ning-Shu quickly picked out the threads one by one and sorted them out. When the discussion stopped, she began to ask questions. She asked 3 questions. "You, the town, are all surnamed Bai? Every year, 3 people die. When did it start? Who is it? Who is the third brother of Bai?" Chapter 510. After Ning-Shu asked the 3 questions, the chattering crowd suddenly became silent, as if they had touched upon some unspeakable secret. Everyone kept their mouths shut and did not dare to make a sound. Xiahou Qing curled up the corners of his mouth and smiled. "It seems that you are not in a hurry to catch the murderer, nor are you afraid that he will swing his axe again next year, nor are you afraid that his hand will fall on your necks to claim your lives. In that case, please do as you wish. Juicy, we are not welcome here. Go back to the inn and pack up your things. We will leave immediately. Prince Xiahou, please wait." The white-haired mayor hurriedly chased after them and urged them to stay. His face revealed a hesitant expression. After struggling for a long time, he finally sighed and told them the whole story. "Fine, this old man will answer you. The first question is, the people of our Baijia town are surnamed Bai. Hundreds of years ago, our ancestors were once a huge clan. Our clan was flourishing and had great prestige. Later, we were framed and betrayed by scoundrels. We were expelled from our hometown and migrated to this land. After that, we set down an ancestral rule: never trust a person of a different race easily, and never marry a person of a different race. If there is a disobedient person, he will be whipped, deprived of his family name, and driven out of Baijia town. He will never be able to step foot in this town." After hearing a few words, Hui Mo was shocked. "You are all surnamed Bai? Then what about your marriage? Even if they don't share the same ancestor, if this goes on for a long time, the people in your town will become blood relatives within a few generations. With more relatives on top of each other, the children born will most likely be crippled. How can this continue?" Ning-Shu and Xiahou Qing could not help but secretly frown. No wonder there were lame Laro Ba, Lai Tu Sai, and women who could not have children. It was not a coincidence, but a problem in the bloodline of the people here. The people of Baijia town immediately roared, "What do you know? Our ancestors set this ancestral rule to ensure the unity of our community, to protect our bloodline from being contaminated by outsiders, and to prevent us from being betrayed and to survive in peace for thousands of years. As for our descendants, we have not perished for hundreds of years. Don't talk nonsense here and offend our ancestors." Facing this group of ignorant people, Hui Mo was dumbfounded. He didn't know what to say. You are simply. Jusai pulled him back and said in a low voice, "Summer insects can't talk about ice. Hundreds of years of thinking are deeply rooted. How can a few words wake them up? Let's keep listening." Hui Mo could only shut his mouth angrily and squat to the side to sulk. Xiahou Qing said, "My imperial bodyguard is young and impetuous. He doesn't know anything and has offended you." Chapter 511. The mayor wiped his face and said with difficulty, "The first one to die was my descendant. After I married my wife, I couldn't have a child for many years. It wasn't until I was 30 years old that we finally had our first child. Unexpectedly, he died of illness when he was 4 or 5 years old. A few years later, we gave birth to another child, but he died of a cold. It wasn't until we were 40 that we finally had our third child. We raised him like a treasure and he grew up to be a strong and smart boy. After that, we arranged for his marriage and gave birth to a grandson and a granddaughter. I thought that my life was finally complete with 3 generations under the same roof. I didn't expect that 3 years ago, my son went out for a business trip and got sick again. He was so sick that he became muddle-headed and lost his mind. We watched over him day and night, fearing that something would happen to him. But on the day of the Mystery Maiden Festival, I had to preside over the ceremony and couldn't leave. So, I drugged him and locked him in the house. But I didn't expect that he still ran out and jumped into the well with his son and daughter. When I came back, his body floated up. My son, my family's bloodline was completely cut off. The old mayor cried blood with every word. Everyone who heard it was sad. A soft-hearted woman wiped his tears for him. "It's all by Lausan's fault. It's all his fault for breaking the ancestral rules and bringing a foreign woman back to the town. That's why there was such a disaster later. That bastard deserved to die." Hearing the name by Lausan again, Ning Shu pulled Xiahou Qing's sleeve. Xiahou Qing understood and asked again for her, "Who is this by Lausan?" The woman said, "Oh, him. He was originally one of the smartest youngsters in our town. His parents passed away early, and the townspeople pitied him. They helped each other to raise him up, providing him with a mouthful of rice and a piece of cloth. Especially the mayor, he took care of him and treated him like half a son. The mayor personally taught him how to read and write. He was the first one in our town to go out to take the imperial examination. Everyone treated him as a literary star. But who would have thought that when he grew up, he would actually do such a thing? He went out to take the high scholar examination and actually got together with a woman from another tribe. Not only did he get together with her, he even brought her back to town to perform the wedding ceremony." Xiao Zhongping listened attentively and couldn't help but ask, "What happened later? What did you do to him? For hundreds of years, he has betrayed the teachings of the ancestors. Such a vile creature naturally needs to be whipped and chased out of the town. But I didn't expect that even so, they still couldn't stop the bad luck of our Bai town." Not long after they left, the mayor's son fell ill, and then that incident happened during the Mystic Maiden Festival. After that, strange things kept happening until now. "Goddess Shen Nayu, please calm down. Don't be angry anymore and let us live." The townspeople knelt and kowtowed in the direction of the statue. These ignorant people had no idea what was going on, and what these mysterious things were all about. When they were at their wits' end, they could only pray again and again to the gods that they had faithfully believed in since they were born for a sliver of mercy. As for whether it was useful or not, what could they do? Ning Shu could not comment on these people's actions. She could only continue to ask, "By Laro-san, where is he?" The townspeople laughed mockingly and said sarcastically, "Of course he's dead. They violated the rules of the clan, so how could the ancestors forgive them? On the day of the leader's son's funeral, he brought that foreign woman back to pay respects, but we jointly drove them out. Not long after that, we heard the news of their sudden death. It was said that they were poisoned, and their deaths were particularly tragic. No one could collect their bodies. In the end, our mayor was soft-hearted and came forward to take care of their family's funeral. His body was buried in the wild mountain outside the town, and it could be said that he was guarding the family. As for the foreign woman and her child, they were sent back to their original place. If you ask me, the mayor is too kind. Such an unfilial descendant who disobeyed the ancestors, a traitor to the whole Bai town, should be ground to ashes and fed to the animals. Chapter 5:12. The sparse white hair on the mayor's head was lifted by the wind, like a dead branch buried in the yellow soil. There was not a single living leaf, only broken meridians. He smiled bitterly for a while and shook his head. Dead people don't owe anything. No matter what he did wrong, it's all in the past. There's no need to mention it again. We watched him grow up with our own eyes. He was a good child in my eyes, just like my good-for-nothing son. The townspeople bowed their heads. My condolences, Mayor. An old man who spoke before said to Ning Shu and others, "You just said that you could help us find the murderer who killed the lame-eighth and the others. But we've wasted so much time talking. Have you found anything? You're not lying to us, are you?" "That's right. We've told you everything you want to know. If you don't give us an explanation, we don't care if you're the Crown Prince or the Emperor of Heaven. Although the people of Baijia Town are all country bumpkins, we still have gut." Facing the increasingly noisy questioning of the crowd, Ning Shu kept her head down and thought quietly without saying anything. Then she slowly walked to the lame-eight's wife, who was crying so hard that she almost fainted. "Your husband didn't come. Why didn't you know?" The woman covered her face with tears falling from her fingers. "He was going to come. Last night, when we were chatting, he said that he would go to the mystic fairy to pray for his good brother, the deceased young master of the mayor's family. He prayed that the mystic fairy would bless him with a good family in the next life. This morning, when we were about to set off, he suddenly said that someone was looking for him for something urgent and asked me to go first. He quickly followed me. Who knew that when I went to the mystic fairy's temple and waited for a long time, he didn't come. Then I heard this bad news." She cried and cried until she couldn't hold on anymore and fainted. Everyone hurried to help her. Xiahou Qing said softly in her ear, "Little Shu, do you have an idea in your mind?" Ning Shu nodded, "Yes, a guess. However, I have one last question." Xiahou said, "Little Shu, do you want to ask about the relationship between the 3 dead people in front of you and the deceased son of the mayor?" Having her thoughts guessed, Ning Shu's eyes lit up like stars. "Yes, that's right. How do you know?" Xiahou Qing's lips slightly raised, revealing a mysterious smile. His slightly cold fingertips lightly touched the tip of her nose. "I am the roundworm in Xiao Shu's stomach. Naturally, I know everything. Let me ask for you." Xiahou Qing's voice was as clear as jade. He asked the last question for Ning Shu. "Soon," someone said, "they're about the same age and grew up together. Their relationship is pretty good. A few years ago, when Pork Mantis lost his wife, he was depressed and drank all day long. He wasn't in the mood to do business and turned himself into something neither human nor ghost. I even saw cripple old BA and the others trying to persuade him. Among them was the son of the mayor's family. Their relationship should be good. Why are you asking this question? Is it related to this case? It's related." After getting the answer to her last question, the mess in Ning Shu's heart was finally solved. She saw the truth that was hidden at the core of the mess. "I know who the murderer is. Who on earth is it?" Not only the townspeople of Baijia Town, but also all the people present were looking at her. They were eagerly looking forward to the final answer that kept them in suspense. "Ning Shu, don't keep us guessing. Tell us quickly. Who on earth is it?" Xiao Zhongping was extremely curious. This was an unsolved case with no clues. 3 years had passed, and 6 of the 9 victims were dead. The 3 in front of him were also difficult to find any clues. How could she solve the case so quickly in such a short time? Ning Shu's eyes slid over the faces of everyone present. They were either curious, horrified, expectant or scared. In short, they were all wonderful. Even the old mayor who was about to die couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Who on earth is this cruel man? Is he hiding among us? Miss, please tell us quickly and solve our Baijia Town's dilemma." Ning Shu's gaze was fixed on his face that was full of wrinkles, on his turbid and dim eyeballs, and on each of his wrinkles that varied in depth. She said, "Here, here, here. It's you." Chapter 5:13. Her words were like cold water dripping into boiling oil, instantly arousing countless crackling noises. Inside and outside the scene, thousands of townspeople instantly broke out in violent resistance. "What nonsense are you talking about? Our mayor has always been benevolent and benevolent. He protects the entire Baijia town and everyone in the town. How could he be that terrible murderer? It must be that you don't have the ability to find the murderer, so you don't want to harm him. Apologize to our mayor immediately, or we'll make sure you're not going to get away with it." Yes. How could it be the mayor? It's ridiculous. This girl is bold and presumptuous. How dare she slander the mayor? Beat her to death. Beat her to death. The mayor shook his head with a wry smile and stretched out his arms to help Ning-Shu calm down the anger of the crowd. "Everyone, don't be angry. This child is still young and probably doesn't know anything. As the saying goes, children's words carry no harm. Don't take it to heart. This person is the Crown Prince of Nanping Wang. He has also helped the people of Great Yu to win the war and take revenge. Even if it is for his sake, everyone should restrain themselves. Xiaoho Shizi, this old man knows that you all want to help our Baijia town, but this case is complicated and unpredictable, so there is no need to trouble you. Please go back. This old man will personally escort you and ensure that you leave here safe and sound." His action of repaying evil with good made Xiao Zhongping couldn't help but whisper in Huemo's ear. "This mayor looks very kind. How could it be him? Could it be that Ning-Shu was seriously injured and even her head was injured, so she thought wrong?" Facing the crowd and thousands of angry eyes, Ning-Shu was afraid but not timid. She clenched Xiaoho Qing's hand and absorbed his strength. She looked at the mayor and said with great certainty again, "I said, it's right. The murderer is you." The mayor sighed and said with great sadness, "Why are you so paranoid? Is it because this old man was disrespectful to you at the beginning, so I annoyed you? Well, as you said, if these murders were really done by me, doesn't it mean that I killed my own children and grandchildren with my own hands? Don't forget, the people who died in the first year were my children and grandchildren. May I ask, miss, how did I lose my mind and end my bloodline?" Ning-Shu said, "You are the murderer. But those who were killed did not include your descendants. The ones you really killed were the 3 furs in front of you, the 3 furs from last year, and old Third Bai's family." Unknowingly, the stuttering in her speech grew less and less, and she gradually became fluent. Moreover, her gaze grew calmer and firmer as if she'd shed all the dirt on her body and found herself once more. As if he had heard some nonsense, the mayor's benevolent face suddenly turned cold. He sneered and said, "What this young lady said is interesting. You said that this old man is the murderer, and also said that I didn't kill my sons and grandsons. Then how did they die? Could it be an accident? Moreover, I watched the crippled 8th brother and the others grow up. They were good friends with my son. After my son died, I treated them as half of my sons. There was no enmity between us, so why would I kill them? Could it be that I'm also crazy?" Ning-Shu was not afraid of him. As long as she was doing what she thought was right, as long as the person next to her was holding her hand, she was full of courage. "You are not crazy. On the contrary, you have a plan, a destination, and spent 3 years to carefully arrange all of this. It's true that you had no enmity with them in the past, but ever since your son committed suicide, you've treated them as your greatest enemies in your life. That's because you believe that they were the ones who killed your son." Chapter 5:14. The mayor's expression became more and more absurd. He almost mocked, "My son committed suicide. Why would he commit suicide for no reason? He was indeed ill at that time, but under our careful care, he took medicine every day and recovered more than half of his condition. All the doctors in the town knew about this. Why would he commit suicide at that critical moment? Moreover, he even dragged his young son and daughter with him. There was a trace of sorrow in Ning Shu's voice. It was as if she was reminiscing the memory of another brave person across an unfathomable space and time. Because he knew that Baijia town was wrong. All of you were wrong. If my guess is correct, the cause of all this should be the third brother of the Bai family, who was the first to leave this place and participate in the imperial examination. The people who were locked in the cage of Baijia town all their lives had no way to know the outside world. People who had been imprisoned in the old order for too long did not realize that the order was a cage. It was a rope that tied them up, a knife that cut off their legs, not allowing them to take a step out of this place. Over time, they mistakenly thought that the order was a golden bell that protected them. In the end, even they themselves became part of the cage, imprisoning more people. However, one day, one of the people who were sleeping suddenly opened his eyes. He broke the fence, broke the rope, and saw another vast world. He knew the truth of all things. Then, he returned to the cage with the truth. He wanted to wake up all the people who were sleeping in the cage and give them a new life. He did not expect that he would become the target of public criticism. He was despised by tens of thousands of people and was kicked out of the iron prison with bruises all over his body. There was only one person left, and that was the mayor's son. Because he missed his former partner, he went out of the town with the fur merchant who visited the town and found his close friend. After a deep conversation, his chaotic mind was awakened. He finally realized why the people in their town were so different from the people outside. From the ancestors to the younger generation, more and more of the next generation became disabled, dull, and even died early from illness. Even his own children were not so healthy. With a heart full of resentment, he returned to the town and had a deep discussion with his father, who was the mayor. He wanted to change the current situation of Bai Town and give the people here a future, as well as a future for their entire clan. However, he didn't expect that his new and correct way of thinking would be severely reprimanded by his father. He told him that he absolutely shouldn't be delusional and change the rules established by his ancestors over hundreds of years. Otherwise, he would become the sinner of the entire family. However, he was locked up by his father with the excuse of illness and insanity. Every day, he was forced to drink bowl after bowl of black medicine like an animal. His mind, which he thought was awake, was not so clear anymore. Therefore, in his sorrow and despair, on the lively Mystery Lady Festival 3 years ago, he broke through the shackles of his parents and jumped into the well with his immature children. With his life as a drumstick, he fiercely rebelled against the ridiculous family rules. He thought that his death would always be a little bit useful and could at least wake up a few people who were not so sleepy. However, he didn't expect that not only did it not have any effect, but it was also used to whitewash the rules of the ancestors and become another evidence of the death of those who violated it. After experiencing the tragedy of his son's death, his father didn't have a trace of awakening. Instead, he blamed Bai Laosan, who was the first to wake up, and used their former relationship to poison his whole family. Then, he pretended to be Emetria. With the heart of Buddha, the family of 3 couldn't be buried together and couldn't be reunited for generations. Then, in the 3rd year, it was those fur traders who took his son out of the town. Finally, it was now. Ning Shu finished her analysis and narration intermittently, and finally said, "Mayor, these are all my conjectures based on what you said just now. Originally, I was still a little uncertain. Until just now, when you were wiping your tears, you revealed a piece of your sleeve, and there was a water plant on it." Shi Yang's eyes were sharp, and he immediately went to take a look. There is really a water plant. Could it be that when you killed Lai Chu Sai, you threw his body into the river and got it on the water? The old mayor's calm face finally changed, and he hurriedly pulled back his sleeve. But Ning Shu refused to stop and continued to analyze more evidence. Just now, the statue of Xian Naiyu shed tears of blood. I went closer and smelled it. There was a fishy smell in the blood. It should be the smell of water plant. When you killed Lai Chu Sai, time was tight. You had to rush back to arrange the ceremony, so you didn't have time to wash your hands and change clothes. Then, you mixed the fishy smell with the blood and added the wax, which condensed into a lump. And the eyes of the statue are moving. You hid the blood wax behind it and exposed it to the sun for a long time. It melted, creating the illusion that the statue shed tears of blood. Chapter 5:15. Without fear, Ning Shu met everyone's astonished eyes and said, "If you still have doubts, just check the list of people who recently bought white wax in the town." The townspeople were shocked by her outrageous speculation. They looked at each other in disbelief. Although they were ignorant, they still understood human language. This girl clearly didn't experience the things that happened in their Baijia town in the past 3 years, but she was able to speculate without a single mistake. Could it be that the murderer was really the mayor? But he was the mayor. He was the leader of the Bai family, the backbone of the entire Baijia town, and also the living rule of the Baijia town in the eyes of thousands of townspeople. How could it be? The mayor's expression was about to crack, but he forcefully glued it back together. He refused to admit defeat easily, as if he was betting on his godlike status in the townspeople's heart. Suddenly, a weak voice came from the crowd and said timidly, "Mayor, the mayor did come to my shop to buy white wax 5 days ago. The day when the taut string finally broke, the mask on the mayor's face completely broke into pieces. He suddenly looked back and panted violently. I bought the white wax to pay tribute to my dead descendant. They died on this very day. Can't I buy 2 white wax to mourn them? Don't fall into the trap of outsiders. They are the executioners sent by the imperial court to destroy us." This was a tug-of-war, and it had reached the most critical moment. He was still struggling, but Ning Shu didn't intend to stop. "Let's put the white wax matter aside for now. Let's talk about the wooden ladder in the mystic goddess temple. That statue is 30 feet tall. If you want to do something to the statue's eyeballs, you won't be able to reach that high unless you're an expert. So, the only way is to make a tall wooden ladder in advance." The skin on the mayor's cheeks twitched, and his face turned a deathly pale. He moved his lips and was about to say something to make up for it when the townsfolk, who already knew what was going on, beat him to it. Half a month ago, the mayor did order a wooden ladder from me, and the higher the better. You should know that the taller the ladder was, the more unstable the base would be, and the more difficult it would be to make it. So, I asked the mayor why he wanted such a tall wooden ladder. At that time, the mayor said that the temple of the mystic fairy empress had been in disrepair for a long time, and the eaves were damaged. He ordered me to build it carefully and not make any mistakes. When I heard that it was an important matter, I didn't sleep for a few days. So, I rushed out the wooden ladder and moved to Xian Nu Peak with the mayor. There was no need to say anything else. The truth of the matter had come to light. Then, more clues came out naturally, and every one of them was aimed at the mayor. Ah, 3 years ago, not long after the death of the mayor's son, the mayor came to my medicine shop and bought a lot of cinnabar and arsenic. I asked the mayor why he wanted these things. The mayor said that after the death of the young master, his soul was restless, and he often told him in his dreams that he was haunted by evil spirits. So, he bought those things and drew a few talismans and pasted them in front of the young master's tomb to protect him in his death. Could it be that those things killed by Laro-san and his family? Last year, those fur traders came to do business here, and they stayed in my inn. They didn't plan to stay until the Mystic Goddess Festival. Somehow, when the mayor passed by, he greeted them and talked to them, and they suddenly changed their minds and stayed. After that, I don't know what happened, but the 3 of them suddenly died on the same day. Even my family's inn mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground. Fortunately, I ran away quickly, otherwise I would have met the King of Hell. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.